What up? What up? What up, everybody? Thank you guys for being here. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button. Finally made it on time. Well, at least close to it. Not exactly on time, but we're close enough. We're close enough. Shout out to everybody watching on Rumble. Make sure you guys hit that thumbs up on Rumble. If you haven't hit that thumbs up already, please make sure you do. And of course, shout out to my YouTube viewers. We got 17 in YouTube in the YouTube chat, 15 likes. That's pretty good. Pretty good. Tonight's topic is it's kind of related to what we talked about on the last show, but there's going to be a little more details provided. Let's just say that. Indictments, domestic military deployment, government shutdown equals deep state roundups. Now, I made mention before that this whole fiasco that's going on with the mass deportations and the deployment of the military in these crime-ridden cities is also in an effort to go after high-level targets like funders, organizers, the actual insurrectionists, because what they're doing essentially is launching an insurrection, the Democrats, that is. And it is it's such a sensitive situation that it has to be done covertly, because the media is already trying to spin the narrative that Trump is going after his political enemies, just like I told you they would spin it. And so what's happening is a lot of these players are being picked up and they're being indicted in the civilian courts, and some are being indicted in the military courts. And we're only being told publicly about a few, because as long as these cases and these indictments stay sealed, we'll never hear anything about it in the public. So what we're hearing about in the public is just the tip of the iceberg, right? Like Letitia James getting indicted, and now John Bolton, he was getting indicted around the same time. James Comey getting indicted. And I believe it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was about a week before John Bolton got indicted that the FBI actually raided his house looking for classified documents. The exact same thing they did to Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Turns out John Bolton was actually involved in, I guess, absconding from the White House with classified documents that he shouldn't have left with. So he's basically going to jail. Letitia James committed mortgage fraud, and not only did she commit mortgage fraud, but now she's harboring her criminal niece in the very same property she's being indicted for with the mortgage fraud. And her niece was trying to escape probation in the state of North Carolina, so she moved to Virginia, which is oddly coincidental, to say the least. But These deep state roundups involve more players at the top as well as mid-level, which would be your organizers, your funders, the people cutting the checks, organizing the protests and whatnot. And you see, the thing about America is we do have the freedom to protest. We do have a right to assemble, gather, and voice our grievances, right? But what we don't have a right to do, and this is where it crosses for this is where First Amendment activity crosses the line into illegal activity. It's when you organize protests and rallies and they turn violent, and or the entire purpose of the protest and the rally is to physically impede federal or any government officials, law enforcement mainly, from doing their job. And these anti-ICE protests are exactly that. They're not legal and lawful gatherings. They're not First Amendment protected activity because their whole objective is to impede immigration and customs enforcement, which would be ICE, from deporting the illegal aliens. And isn't it strange to see so many American citizens actually go to bat for illegal aliens? Like, doesn't that strike you as weird? Well, that's because those people that are in support of the illegal aliens are in support of the illegal aliens for certain specific reasons, mainly for the funding, to get their hands on the money that's being given to these illegals by the Democrats and government. But also they're in favor of the replacing of the black population, the black vote, the black electorate, with these new third world voters who know nothing about American politics. And while all this is going on, there's this new class of, and shout out to Jihad Valentine in the chat, mentions Mamdani, who's running for mayor of New York City. Because what I was going to say is, in the midst of all this, the Democratic Party, the International Masons, they already have their new wave of political candidates being put into place, being put in position to basically fill the slots of the former players who inevitably will be removed. Now, why is this moving so slow? Why is it taking so long? I mean, Trump's been in American politics since 2015. So we're at like the 10-year mark. Next year will be 11 years. Why did it take so long? Well, I'll put it to you like this. The deep state has a planning mechanism where they not only select the current players to hold those positions at the current moment, but they also pre-select future players to take over those positions once the current players basically time out or term out, or whatever the case may be, or get voted out, or get, if they buck the system and they have to get exposed and their criminality forces them to have to remove themselves from office, or whatever the case, there's always a new batch of deep state politicians ready to fill those spots. And what's happening is the first round, what has happened is, since Trump took office in 2016, the first round of mass arrests happened between 2017 and 2018. And that would have been, let's go with 2018. That would have been 7 years ago. And 7 years ago, there was a whole generation of high school graduates that were too young to really too young and too inexperienced to really get involved in any real political action. But now here we are 7 years later, those 17 and 18-year-old kids are now 24 and 25, and they are the new replacements, the new recruits for the deep state players. So now another round of mass arrests has to go down to remove this second wave. And if it was all done at once, right? in Trump's first term, what would have happened was they would have gotten quiet for a little while, and then by now they would have made a full resurgence. They would have been back with the propaganda, trying to get elected into office again, back stealing elections, and trying to reopen the borders again. So in order to prevent that from happening, you got to take out the first wave, then you got to give it a few years, come back and take out the second wave. And that's where we're at now. We're in the round of taking out the second wave. So things are getting real interesting, and we're starting to see these major events all start to coincide, because a government shutdown, that's definitely a major event. These high-level politicians getting indicted, that's a major event. Then we have the domestic deployment of the military, just like Q told us Trump would do. That is also a major event. And as far as the indictments go, all we're hearing about is these civilian indictments. We're not hearing anything about the military indictments because, well, that's all classified information. The domestic military deployment, all we're hearing about is the National Guard being deployed to these crime-ridden cities to fight crime, to help stomp out the crime, which in most cities where they have been deployed, the people are actually happy to report that they're not having the crime problem that they used to anymore. And of course, the government shutdown being the stoppage of the funding to these corrupt and crooked organizations, because what's happening is a lot of the funding that was going to the illegals was not being given directly by these Democrats in the government, these local Democrats, but instead what was happening was these 501c3 non-governmental organizations, these nonprofit organizations, they were like the middlemen, where they provide the housing and the funding and all that shit for the illegal aliens, but inevitably, their funding came from government grants. So because Trump allowed the shutdown to go on, that grant money has stopped. The tax money that was being funneled through these nonprofit organizations is no longer being funneled through these nonprofit organizations. And unfortunately, the very same men and women of the military that Trump's depending on to conduct these operations, their paychecks have stopped with the government shutdown. And this is why Trump is looking to either have Congress pass a resolution or sign an executive order to divert funding from elsewhere, mainly from Congress, to the military in order to get those people paid, because it's kind of hard to get people to show up to work when they're not being paid, right? But it's all happening all at once because it's all connected. The government shutdown cuts off the money to the illegals. The domestic military deployments affords the Trump administration to send out special operations units to conduct these snatch and grab operations to arrest these individuals that are responsible for aiding and abetting these illegals, funding and housing these illegals, etc. And of course, the indictments would be the end result of these investigations, and the lower level individuals being picked up and telling on the high level individuals. So it's all one big master plan. It's all one big major play, and it's all geared towards draining the swamp. This is the swamp draining that we're witnessing. All right. So when people say, "Oh, I want to see arrests, I want to see people go to jail," it's happening. We're just not being shown. We're just not being shown that it's happening through normal broadcast channels, right? Through normal mainstream media. They're going to keep that shit quiet. They're going to try to keep it as quiet as they can. I mean, have you heard anything about Letitia James being indicted in the fake news too much? They might have mentioned it once or twice. And when she was under investigation, it was all over the news because her lawyer was all over the news saying that, "Oh, this is bullshit. It's not gonna happen. She's innocent, blah, blah, blah. Charges are gonna be dropped, blah, blah, blah." Well, that ain't the case, and that ain't happening. And what's crazy to me is a lot of what these deep state players have been accusing Donald Trump of, like the sexual perversion thing, the improper use of government funds thing, the classified documents thing, the insurrection thing, everything they've accused Trump of is exactly what it is they're doing. It's like these people have no creativity whatsoever. They can't even think of a creative lie to tell on Trump that they themselves aren't guilty of. It's insane. It's like being with the cheating girlfriend who's constantly accusing you of cheating. You know, after a while, you got to start to wonder, like, hey, why is this always constantly on your mind like this? Like, why is this the first thing that you always go to when you have a problem? But that's what they've been doing, and this is the retribution. And Trump is not fucking around with these people. Trump is not playing around. Now, somebody asked me about the Israel thing, and what do I think about the Israel thing? Well, as we have seen with the Charlie Kirk incident, Israel has a very strong footprint here in the United States, and they are well embedded within our population, and they have hit teams all over the country ready to spill blood upon receiving the order. So Trump has to really tread lightly when it comes to severing ties with Israel, and it has to be done in a casual way to where he appears to be friendly with them, but on the back end, he's putting the screws to them. For example, the BRICS nations spent decades trying to establish themselves as an economic power within the trade world, the global, the international trade markets. And for most of our lives, from the time we were teenagers to now, if you're in your mid 30s like me, or mid to late 30s like me, we've always been at war with all these Middle Eastern countries. And when you look back at the purpose for going to war from 9/11 on forward, it becomes apparent that these nations were trying to ditch the fiat dollar and switch to a gold-backed currency. These were the prerequisite or the preemptive moves to establish the BRICS as a superpower within the international trade markets. But that was never allowed to happen, because every time one of these Middle Eastern countries would, or one of these African countries for that matter, would move to ditch the dollar and go back to precious metals backed currencies, all of a sudden our news would start reporting how the country's ran by this evil, wicked dictator and he needs to be stopped and he's killing his own people and blah, blah, blah. And the American people would be like, yeah, let's get him. And then we'd go in there, whether using ISIS, quote unquote, by being called the rebels by the mainstream media, or our own military. And it was being done to destabilize those governments, replace that leadership who did not want to stay on the Rothschild banking system, with puppet politicians who would keep their nations in the Rothschild banking system. And then when Trump came into office, all of a sudden we saw this rash of countries across Africa and the Middle East all switching to gold-backed currencies. We saw this rise of the BRICS nations establishing themselves with the BRICS Development Bank, with Russia and China at the helm of that operation. And now BRICS is an international trading superpower, along with the United States and Europe and so on. So now we have real competition in the world in terms of the international trade markets. But another thing that we have now is the two military superpowers, the two other military superpowers besides the United States, being Russia and China, now have Israel in the crosshairs. So what's happening is, the whole time we've been hearing that China's trying to go to war with America, Russia's trying to go to war with America, blah, blah, blah. It was bullshit. It was the Russian deep state and the Chinese deep state trying to destabilize America. But those nations have done away with their deep state infiltrations. We're still working on ours. And now that Russia and China has been purged of their deep state operatives, they are now basically flying straight. They're on the up and up. And China has leveled a very serious threat against Israel, because Israel has been bombing and sinking the aid ships that were bringing food to the people of Gaza. And China is now sending ships to Gaza, and they have threatened Israel and said that if Israel so much as puts a scratch, not sinks, but puts a scratch on one of their ships, they will wipe Israel off the map. So what I believe is going to happen when it comes to Israel is eventually China will wipe Israel off the map, and America will sit back. Trump will sit back and let it happen, but be blameless in it all, because his perceived enemy is the one who took out Israel and not him. So the Zionist forces here in the United States that do carry out presidential assassinations like they did when they killed Kennedy, they will be in a bit of a state of confusion, because they won't know whether to go after Trump or not. And they won't be able to go after China because they don't have a strong infiltration within the Chinese government like they do here in the United States. Because you'd be hard pressed to find a Jew that looks Chinese. But there's plenty of them here that look like regular white people, and they can fit and blend right in. So it's very easy to infiltrate us, much easier to infiltrate us than infiltrate China. But I believe China is going to be used as a proxy by Trump to destroy Israel. And it's all going to be done while Trump is smiling, shaking hands, and playing grab ass with Netanyahu. And I think this is another reason for all the ass kissing, because when the BRICS heat comes down on Israel, America will be powerless to do anything about it, because then Trump could put his hands up and say, hey, Israel, I helped you out as much as I could. There's not much else I can do for you, because we have a government shutdown here, so we can't move any money to help you. We can't move any military equipment to help you. We got our own domestic issues. As you can see, I had to deploy our military here on our own American streets. So sorry, Israel, you're on your own. And I sincerely hope that by the end of this second Trump term, that's the way it plays out, because all the destabilization, the terrorism, the war, and everything that's been happening in the Middle East over the course of the 20th century has been mainly the work of Israel. Israel has been behind it all. So the only way to truly achieve peace in the Middle East is by essentially eliminating the nation of Israel, neutralizing the nation of Israel. And Trump just made a peace deal with Netanyahu in Palestine to stop the war. And then all of a sudden, Israel false flags again. Oh, Hamas is committing public executions right after the ceasefire deal and whatever. And now Israel wants to go back and start bombing Gaza again. And this has kind of been the ongoing pattern since this entire genocide has begun, where peace deals would be made, Israel would agree to the peace deal, then inevitably Israel would then break the peace deal, blame Hamas for breaking the peace deal, and then continue on with the slaughter and the genocide. And a lot of people were mad at Trump for not doing anything about it, but here's the problem. When you got a nation openly committing genocide on the world stage for everybody to see, it's kind of difficult for the American president to stop them by force, because they have his country held hostage. Remember, Israel carried out 9/11. And you think they can't do that shit again? If you think they can't do that shit again, you're mistaken. All they got to do is activate their sleeper cells in one of these big liberal cities. And of course, the liberal politicians who've been bought and paid for will greenlight it and allow it to happen. And next thing you know, we got 4,000 dead Americans, men, women, and children. And it'll be blamed on Hamas or somebody that Israel wants to go to war with. And then next thing you know, we're at war with Israel. Or there might actually be another presidential assassination attempt on Trump. There's no telling which way it can go. But I think from Trump's perspective, He's more concerned about the mass casualty event, the possible mass casualty event, than he is concerned about, them taking his own life. Because just like Q said, measures are being taken to ensure the safety of every man, woman, and child here in America while these operations are being undertaken. And part of ensuring the safety of every man, woman, and child in the country is to keep the deep state forces at bay, keep the Israeli hit teams at bay. And the only way to keep them at bay, is to keep publicly pretending to be allied with them. That's the only way, because that's what they want. They want America on their side. But America is not going to be on their side for much longer. You mark my words. Because they're doing too much and they've gone too far. And Trump knows this. But he also knows that the minute he pulls the plug on Israel for good and takes a public stance against Israel, shit here in the United States is going to start blowing up. There's going to be all these domestic terror events. And of course, the media is going to blame Trump. Like, think about it. Israel and Netanyahu and them, they don't like Trump. They pretend to like Trump. But remember, who controls the mainstream media? The same Zionists. And how's the mainstream media been treating Trump? Not very kindly, have they? So how is it that the Zionist politicians are kissing Trump's ass and showing mad love to Trump, but then the Zionist media is constantly lying on the man and dragging the man? What's that tell you? That tells you that they're not really his friend, and he knows that. And this is why they were so scared when Kanye West came out and started exposing publicly that so much of our media is controlled by these Zionists. Because what they didn't want was people to start drawing connections like, wait a minute, these Israeli politicians keep kissing Trump's ass, but the Israeli-run media is constantly dragging them. What's going on here? Well, that's what's going on. They are using Trump, or at least they think they are. And they've been using and feeding off of America for decades. But Trump is going to bring that shit to a screeching halt. And he's basically stymieing all of their plans, because their main goal was to open up the border, flood the country with this brand new population of third world aliens, and have them replace the lower income electorate in the country to ensure that these international Masons, these Democrats, continue to get reelected, and they continue to have operatives that are favorable to them and will do anything to make sure they stay in power, even if it means shitting on the voting rights of American citizens, black and white alike. Yeah, I heard about that sniper's nest found near Mar-a-Lago airport. I heard about that. You see? And that just goes to prove my point, right? That they got Trump in the crosshairs and he has to pretend to capitulate. Put it like this. Trump is cooperating with Israel the same way an armed robbery victim corroborates with the robber, or cooperates with the robber, right? You're walking down the street. You take a turn down a dark, lonely street. Some guy jumps out of the darkness, pulls a gun on you. You put your hands up. You immediately submit. While he's got that gun pointed at you, he gives you instructions. Give me your wallet. Give me your keys. Give me your jewelry. Hand it all over. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, no, robber, I will not let you rob me because I am against that type of activity and I will not stand for it? No, you're going to get your ass shot off. You're gonna fuck around and lose your butt cheeks, right? No, you comply, you capitulate, you give it all up so you don't get shot. Or let's say there's a bank robbery and the bank robbers got all these hostages held up in the bank. The police, instead of busting down the door and running in there and shooting all the criminals, they're going to cooperate with the criminals to some extent. They're going to bring in the hostage negotiator. They're going to have to play friendly and play nice with them because they got hostages. And that's basically what Trump has been doing with Israel, playing nice because they got the whole country held hostage. And again, this is proven by the fact that every major terrorist event that's happened in this country can be traced back to the Zionist regime of Israel. So if they have enough manpower and operatives and boots on the ground here in America to carry out mass casualty events, essentially the nation is being held hostage. And as the president of this nation, Trump, being responsible for the safety of every man, woman, and child of this nation, he now has to capitulate. So what has to happen is the hostage takers have to be neutralized. And the way you neutralize the hostage takers is you cut off their funding, 2, you intercept their communications, and 3, you gather intel on them by arresting low-level operatives and getting those people to roll over and snitch. And this is why the military is being deployed in these major cities, because these major cities are the operating hubs for these hit teams. Hang on a second. My brother Leonard left me a comment, but I can't really see it. He says, Citizen Man, don't forget the Yids have control of his daughter too through marriage. Yeah, I mean, they have ways to get to him. They got ways to get to him. And they're so hell-bent on killing Trump because they're afraid and they know that Trump is not going to continue to play ball with them. And while Trump is smiling in the cameras and talking nice with Netanyahu, when you look at what's happening on the American streets, their entire system of control is being uprooted. Their political operatives are being indicted, and their boots on the ground anarchist operatives are being rounded up and arrested. And now that the government shutdown's happening and the money's been cut off, it's even more difficult for them to operate because now they have to seek outside funding. But a lot of that outside funding isn't there anymore because during the previous rounds of mass arrests, the CEOs and the big wealthy players that were involved with helping to fund these operations, the auxiliary funding sources, have already been eliminated. So Trump is essentially cornering the roaches. And they are cornered. And this is why they're lashing out. And this is why those anti-ICE protests are so violent. This is why you got J.B. Pritzker in Illinois and Brandon Johnson over in Chicago talking about civil war and fighting the ICE thugs and all this stupid shit because they're getting desperate. They're running out of options because they're running out of money. And once they're out of money, they're vulnerable. And remember, Executive Order 13818, it allows for the federal authorities, the federal government, to seize the assets of people involved in crimes against humanity. And human trafficking is one of those crimes against humanity. And the migrant importation, the importation of these mass numbers of illegal aliens, is legally considered one giant human trafficking operation. You see? So everybody involved in aiding, abetting, and facilitating the illegal aliens are basically eligible candidates to have their assets seized. So Trump's cutting off the money. And this is what Elon Musk was talking about during the Doge audits, when he was saying that Doge is not only uncovering financial crimes, but they're also uncovering worse things than financial crimes. And one of those things is funding of domestic terror cells. So while you hear everything happening in the news and is being broadcast as if these are all separate events that just so happen to be happening at the same time, in reality, it's all connected and it's all working towards a larger plan, which is returning the power of the American government back to the hands of the people by cleaning up the voter rolls and cleaning up the voting system, returning the power of the people, returning the power of this country back to the people by affording them the opportunity to have real legitimate representation, not a bunch of deep state thugs pretending to be their representatives, and also removal of these foreign invaders and restoring these American communities back into the hands of Americans. And when I'm sure you guys recall when I read that excerpt about the American Masons versus the International Masons, you can basically see the agenda clear. You'd be able to see the agenda a bit more clearly, where the International Masons are all about one world government, and the American Masons are about the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America. And when you look at the Democrats versus not just the Republicans, but the Trump Republicans in particular, because there's a whole gang of Republicans that are International Masons as well, and they're down with the one world government, the Never Trumpers, for example. The Trump Republicans want to maintain American sovereignty, keep us under constitutional law, and keep the power of this country in the hands of the voters. Whereas the International Masons, they want to strip the voters of that power, and they want to make America subject to international law. You see what I'm saying? So there's two different factions at war here, and one of the main fundamental differences between the American Masons and the International Masons is the American Masons, in order to become a member of that fraternal order, you have to have a belief in a grand creator. Whereas in the International Masons, you don't have to have a belief in the grand creator. You can come in there believing whatever you want. Do as thou wilt, basically. That Aleister Crowley shit. Whereas in American Masonry, they believe in a God which comes with a certain set of rules that are based in morality, and those rules are never to be broken. So they have a moral compass. This is why you see the Republicans mainly fighting and pushing back against the LGBT movement and the trans movement and all that perverted shit. Whereas you see the Democrats in full favor of all that perversion and the trans nonsense and all of that shit, because they say they have no God, but when you have no God, that means Satan is your God. Because without that moral compass that points to the line of demarcation between good and evil, you remove that compass, you essentially blur the lines between good and evil, and now evil can be painted as good and good can be painted as evil. You see what I'm saying? And that's dangerous. And we've seen the dangers of it, especially with these men getting into women's sports pretending to be women. Or these males going into female bathrooms and basically sexually assaulting the women and the girls in the bathrooms. It creates a dangerous society when you stray away from the basic moral code. But they want to turn America into one big nation of debauchery and Satanism and everything evil, because this essentially will become their playground where they come to get their jollies and, sleep with the kids and, all of that shit, get their dope and get high. And you know what I'm saying? Like, they want to turn America into their perverted Babylonian playground, Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, these major cities that Trump's sending the military to, these major cities are all ran by Democrats. They're all big Democratic cities. And These Democrats, again, are international Masons. They don't believe in a God. They believe in do as thou wilt. And this is why in these major cities, you see the crime out of control, the perversion out of control. Those are the schools that are pushing the sexualization of the children the hardest and pushing it the most. Those are the cities where you find the highest concentration of these mentally ill trans individuals. And those are the cities where this satanic debauchery is being allowed to fester and flourish. And along with this satanic debauchery and this LGBT stuff comes the pedophilia, the child trafficking, and everything else that goes along with it. And time again, there's been Democrats being caught up with child porn, selling child porn, having it on their computers, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, some local politician is a man pretending to be a woman, happens to be BFFs with that Democrat from California, Eric Swallowswell, and that local transgender Democrat just got arrested and indicted for having child porn on his computer. So go figure. This is who these people are. This is what they're into. And they serve Satan. And what you're seeing is in the media is the demonization of Trump campaign kicking into high gear. You notice how Brother Sanchez has been doing a lot of streams and kind of dragging Trump and fear mongering and all that shit and putting the fake AI picture of Trump with his tongue out in the thumbnail in order to give you a negative impression of Trump. This is all the work of the deep state, and this is their effort, their final last ditch attempt before they all go to jail to try to make Trump look like the bad guy. So when they finally do start going to jail and it starts becoming public knowledge that they're going to jail, people are going to be more prone to believe the mainstream narrative that Trump is going after his political opponents because he's just this big, bad, evil man. And he's not there to serve the American people. He's just there to seize power and enrich himself. Mind you, the man lost 75% of his wealth in his first term as president and didn't start making that money back until he formed a Trump Media Group. And he's still not back to the $10 billion mark that he started at. But then when you look at every other deep state president in history, they all started with a little bit of money and ended with 10 times more than what they started with. Right, Nick the Artist, the Democrats. And that's exactly who these people are, a bunch of freaking demons. But speaking of demons, you guys heard about those 10 fellas that broke out of jail in Louisiana? And they all got caught except for one, and he remained on the run, and he finally got caught. And guess how he got caught? He was staying with some woman, and the woman ratted on him. Derek Groves was his name, and I thought this was funny and worth sharing because I hear a lot of people say, the downfall of every man is a bad woman, right? And I hear a lot of men say, don't get married because you're just setting yourself up for failure. And I believe that to an extent, because I've seen this happen so many times where a man will be in a relationship with a woman, and as long as everything goes the way she wants it to go, it's all good. And as soon as things start going awry and she's not getting what she wants, everything has to be destroyed, including that man. It's the same mentality of the bitter baby mamas, right? Like, when you're with them, you get to see your kid every day. As soon as y'all break up, for whatever reason, and she's not with you no more, now all of a sudden you get alienated from your kid. You got to go to court. You get put on child support. And she basically does everything to make your life hell because she couldn't control you or get what she wanted out of you. Well, Derek Groves seemed to have found himself in a similar situation. Derek Groves' girlfriend he was living with was reportedly the one who sent the info to police of his whereabouts. They got into an argument, and she was reportedly tired he was broke and wasn't making any money. So she called the information hotline in order to try and get the $20,000 reward. And you know what? I'm not sure how this case worked out, but I hope she goes to jail too. I hope she goes to jail too. Because I bet you what she was thinking was, I'm going to get with this dude. I'm going to let him come stay with me because he's famous and, he can make money on social media and this and that. But of course, the man's on the run from the law. So he's not going to be all over social media like that because he can't. He has to stay low. And part of staying low means that your options for getting out there and being able to get a job are limited. There's not much you can do to make money. But she didn't think about that. All she thought about was the clout that he had. And with that clout comes money. But the money never came. She got mad and tried to get the $20,000 reward. Yes, exactly, Barnes. She was harboring a fugitive, which is a felony. And I hope, because she made that report, I hope she goes right to jail with his ass. And if she doesn't go to jail with him, that means that the system is obviously skewed in favor of women, which has been proven time and time again. There's been cases where children were horribly abused by a man and a woman, and the man would get 1,000 years in prison and the woman would get 2 days of probation. And then later on, you come to find out that it was the woman that was the one that was really behind, the abuse of the child and was the ringleader and got away with it. So I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't get charged, but I sure would like to see her get charged. Because that'll do two things. One, that would discourage other people in the future from harboring these fugitives. But also what it would do is for anyone who makes that decision to harbor that fugitive, that would put them on notice that you can't control this person and hang the threat of jail over their heads, because once you make that call, you're going to jail right with them. So I guess in a way that would inspire a bit more loyalty. But, shit. He should have known there was something wrong with this chick, because any half-decent woman with a place of her own and is a productive member of society, if she's willing to date a man that broke out of jail, like something's wrong with her. You know what I'm saying? Like, never mind him. We knew he was a fuck up. He was already in prison. That's why he had to break out. But for her to think it was a good idea to move him into her home and have a relationship with him, like something's fucking wrong with her. And I hope Derek Groves learns his lesson that he would have been better off being homeless and sleeping under a bridge than living with this woman, because, well, she put you right back in jail. And he would have gotten away with it if she didn't tell on him. You know what I'm saying? So just like behind him, every great man, there's a good woman. Behind every fucked up man, there's a fuck ass bitch. Because first of all, Derek Groves was obviously raised by his mama, and his mama actually did a couple of interviews when he first broke out of jail and was on the run. And you could tell his mama ain't right in the head. So she already raised him fucked up. And then from being a criminal fuck up to being a lousy boyfriend, he finds himself right back in jail. And it all started at the hands of women. Mama didn't raise him right. Girlfriend ain't treat him right. And he's right back in prison. And unfortunately, I have to say, it's probably where he belongs, because some guys are too, they've been so screwed up their whole lives that once they reach a certain age, ain't no saving them motherfuckers. Iron FE just came through with the update. So she did get arrested. Derek Grove's girlfriend arrested in major breakthrough in New Orleans, legal United States. Very interesting, Iron FE. I'm glad you provided us with that update. And I don't know why you don't have a wrench. You've been rocking with us forever. Good. So she did get arrested. Good. I'm glad. I am glad. So, guys, before we really get into it, though, because I notice I'm starting to get into the slides and I haven't even done the promos yet, make sure you guys go subscribe to the Citizen Man Backup channel. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure you do. Also, follow me on Rumble, because Rumble is where I have the bulk of my political content that I cannot keep up on YouTube. So, in order to avoid being flagged on YouTube, I stream on Rumble and YouTube. So if my content on YouTube may possibly violate community guidelines, I can take the streams down off of Rumble, which I've already had to do. And take them down off of YouTube, which I've already had to do, and I can keep them up on Rumble, where you guys can just click the link in the description box and get over to Rumble and watch all of those streams. Shout out to my Rumble audience, by the way. Appreciate you guys being here. And make sure you guys hit that thumbs up. I don't know if anyone has yet. We got 20 watching on Rumble and 4 thumbs ups. We need more thumbs ups, y'all. Come on. Come on, Rumblers. We can do better than that. All right. And shout out to my replay viewers, by the way. I always forget to shout out my replay viewers. And, of course, the Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. Get yourself a copy of the Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. Get back to nature, natural healing, metabolic cooking for the weight loss recipes, and anabolic cooking for the muscle building recipes. All 3 books are linked in the description box of every video. I'm about to discontinue the book sale pretty soon. So I'll have to redo my description box with my support links, and I'm going to have 3 new products for sale in place of the books here soon. I'm probably going to do that swap this sometime during the week this week. So by next weekend, the new products will be up and available. All right. Also, last but not least, if you guys would like to support the show by sending in a kind donation, you could do so via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo using the tags scrolling across the screen in the banner below. The links that are pinned to the top of the YouTube chat in the black box where it says Citizen Man TV in yellow. Just click the yellow, the box opens up, and all the links are there. And I want to give a big shout out to my good brother, Frank, that hit me on the PayPal a few weeks ago. I forgot to shout out brother Frank. And shout out to my sister Joy that hit us on the Cash App for the last show. Shout out to Sister Joy. I appreciate that support, my sister. Thank you for that Cash App on the replay. Support on the replay. That was pretty awesome. All right, so let's get into it. So, top stories. The retribution presidency that Trump promised has officially arrived. So Trump is going after the deep state, and the fake news is calling it the retribution presidency. Hang on a second, y'all. So they're already calling it Trump's basically calling it Trump's revenge tour. Pretty much. They're already characterizing Trump's takedown of the deep state as him going after his political enemies. And I've been telling you guys this from day one, right? The minute Trump starts really going after these people, they're going to be all in the news talking about Trump is abusing his political power and going after his political enemies for no other reason other than they oppose him politically, blah, 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 blah. And lo and behold, here we are. Here we are. And that's exactly what they're trying to pull. But I think it's too little too late, and people already know, because even the people in these Democratic cities, like in Chicago, that started off hating Trump, they're starting to support Trump now. And what the Democrats are really afraid of is they're really afraid of losing their black voter base, because they thought that bringing in the illegals would help sell the black brown alliance and they would shore up their Democratic voter rolls. But instead, what happened is these illegals started encroaching on the black people, taking up the housing that the black people depend on, adding to the crime that the black people in these cities were already having to deal with. And those black folks started turning against and the worst part about it was the same black people who, a lot of them, their ancestors were slaves and had their labor stolen and are owed compensation in the form of, some would call it reparations, others would call it restitution. And they had received nothing from the Democrats in terms of when it comes to the fight for reparations. And the Democrats' excuse has always been, well, we don't have the money, we don't have the money, we don't have the money. But then these same black people watch these Democratic politicians invite this entire foreign population into their city, and they're icing these motherfuckers out. They paying their rent for 2 years, giving them $20,000, or like $5,000-$6,000 a month in food stamps. Meanwhile, the poor black people in those cities that have been suffering for generations have gotten nothing from these Democrats. So that alone was a slap in the face to these Democratic voters. And a lot of them are turning against the Democrats. And now what's happening is a lot of these states are redrawing their congressional district lines. And mainly in the state of Illinois, I believe it is, with J.B. Pritzker in them, they redrew a bunch of districts where they split the black vote between several districts rather than having these majority black districts. And the reason for that is, on the surface, it appears as if it's typical Democratic racism where we want to dilute the black vote. But in reality, what I think it is it is a healthy fear of black voters switching Republican and not being faithful Democratic voters anymore. And again, that's because these black folks had to watch these Democrats bring in the illegals and treat the illegals better than their most loyal voting population, being the black voters. So these black voters, in voting for these Democrats, witness the Democrats bring in the illegals, treat the illegals better than them, and expect that the black voters will continue to vote for Democrats. But these black voters are turning against the Democrats, and the Democrats know it. So in redrawing the districts and splitting up the black vote, they're eliminating the possibility for these majority black districts to exist, and not only exist, but exist and possibly flip red. You see what I'm saying? So there's this whole big fight happening now in these Democratic states over the redistricting, and it's being made out to be a racial issue, but it really boils down to the political leanings of this particular race, being the black race that's having their voting, that's having their districts, their majority districts split. They're splitting the districts because if these N-words, because that's how Democrats think about black people, if these N-words decide that they want to flip and vote red, they still won't have a majority, which means them flipping to vote red won't mean a thing, because their voting power as a block has been diluted through this gerrymandering and this redistricting that we've been doing. You see what I'm saying? So the racist Democrats are now having to do some racist shit to black people to try to snuff out the black vote because they don't have it anymore. But this is what happens when you serve evil, though, because it's the Democrats that are doing all this gerrymandering and redistricting and drawing these squiggly, weird district lines and shit in order to give themselves a political advantage. And the same Democrats that these black people have been faithfully voting for at a 96+% rate are now being essentially forced out of the electorate by having their majority black districts diluted. Now, in some cases, it's actually a good thing because in Texas, the Republicans did the redistricting and they completely eliminated Jasmine Crockett's district. So in 2026, when the midterms happen and the new Congress is elected, Jasmine Crockett, she doesn't even have to be voted out. She's automatically out. And I'm pretty sure there's other districts where Democratic politicians are going to be forced out the same way. So we got a lot of interesting things happening. And another factor, aside from the illegal aliens and the deportations, that's going to turn a lot of Democratic voters to Trump supporters, is the fact that for the first time in our lives, we have a president who's actually willing to go after corrupt politicians and indict corrupt politicians rather than protecting and coddling them. And for a lot of people in America, that really hits home because for far too long, we've sat back and witnessed this corruption and watched these politicians get away with everything short of murder, and nothing was done about it. Now we finally have a president who's doing something about it, and that actually wins over a lot of American voters. Trump's made it to where now, at this point, the Democrats don't stand a chance. And if a Democrat does get elected, they will literally have to get elected in a district full of low IQ, low information voters, or they'd have to cheat, which that in itself, thanks to the 2020 elections, is damn near impossible. Not only that, Dominion voting systems, which was one of their main tools of rigging elections, it's now owned by a Republican supporter. Yeah, a GOP member actually purchased Dominion voting systems. So the power to rig the elections is no longer in the hands of the Democrats. And that's problematic for them. So they're in big political trouble and they are desperate and they will do anything to stay in power and they will tell any lie to stay in power. Excuse me. And frankly, I'm surprised that more shit hasn't started blowing up yet, honestly. And that's the God honest truth. Let's get to slide 3. Breaking: current CIA insiders have leaked that President Trump has approved lethal missions in Venezuela. So Operation Southcom has gone hot. The drug cartels are under attack by the U.S. military. The boats that they use to run the dope are getting bombed. Well, at least the ones that don't stop. First, the military intercepts them, and then if they don't stop and turn themselves in, they get bombed. And we've seen footage of these boats being bombed. And Trump is threatening direct military action on the ground in Venezuela. Possibly airstrikes, maybe sending in hit teams on foot, special operations units on foot to carry out kinetic attacks or snatch and grab operations and whatnot. And there's this big old propaganda push. I don't know if you guys seen it on social media of Venezuelan citizens posing with rifles in their hands as if they're going to take up arms against the U.S. military. Well, good luck to you. Good luck to you, because you're going to get yourselves hurt. And Trump did say no new wars, but yet we're in a new war. But the difference is this is a legitimate war. This is a war that needed to happen. This was the war that everybody was saying should have been happening while Iraq and Afghanistan was happening. How many of you guys remember people saying, well, instead of sending our soldiers all the way over there to go fight crime or to go fight terrorists, they should be right here and crossing the border and going into Mexico and stopping these drug cartels? Well, that's what Trump's doing. So this is actually a real war that will yield real positive results for the United States of America. And it already has, because the fentanyl trafficking coming into the country is way down. The cocaine trafficking coming into the country is way down. And because the cartels are under fire from the U.S. military, they're basically doing a fire sale, and you can get a whole brick of cocaine in the Caribbean for about four or $5,000 now. So the smart drug dealers are making shit tons of money because they're getting all that cheap dope now, but it's not going to last long. Because once these cartels are wiped out and once these operations are neutralized, everything will be local. Hell, we don't even get the Mexican weed anymore. Because I remember when I was in high school, that shit they call Reggie would come from Arizona or Texas, and it was like this dark brown weed that tastes like dirt when you smoke it and had a whole bunch of seeds in it. That's what they call the Mexican brown. Once weed started getting legalized in America, excuse me, and the weed started getting produced in America, you don't see the Reggies no more. You don't see the Mexican brown no more. All we got is gas now. All we got is loud now, because, well, that's the American way. The best shit for the cheapest price. And now you can get an ounce of some good gas for less than what you pay for an ounce of mids back in the day. So now when it comes to the weed game, people are buying American, and Americans are making that money. Christian Gonzalez says, hell yeah, brother. I'm smoking some right now. Me too, dog. Me too. But nah, the weed got better and the weed got cheaper because it's now being produced in America. It's American, it's domestic weed. And this is what's going to happen with all the other products that we've been importing once we transition from foreign dependency on, raw materials and, production materials and whatnot, and we start manufacturing our own materials here in the United States. What happened with the weed is what's going to happen with everything else. You're going to get better quality products at a cheaper price. Because back when the Mexican brown was coming into the country, and that was when I was in the streets, so I knew all about this shit. You know what I'm saying? I was hustling a lot of that shit too before I had my kids and all that. And we used to pay about $1,000 a brick for the weed. My plug used to go down south, well, out west, because we were in Florida. So he would go out west and he would come back with like 100 pounds or so between me and my brother. And I wasn't even hustling with my brother. He just passed me the plug, and I had my own shit going and he had his own shit going. And between me and my brother, we'd move about 70 out of 100 of those pounds every month. And yeah, we was getting money. And the pounds were going for about $1,000 a pound. And the gas that we get now for about $1,200-1,500 a pound was going for like $5,000-6,000 a pound. That was back in the day when the eighths were like, you know what I'm saying? A quarter was like a quarter of some loud was like $100 and shit. But once that Mexican supply got cut off, more people started producing domestically in the United States. And with that new supply being introduced to the game, you started getting better quality weed for much cheaper. Then the prices for the loud went from $5,000 a pound to $3,000 a pound. Now the top shelf shit, you're paying $2,000 a pound, not much more than that. You know what I'm saying? Excuse me. And for some decent gas, you know what I'm saying, you're paying like what you would have paid for a pound of mid. So shit is sweet right now. Almost makes me want to get back into business, but I can't because I'm too old. I can't do that. Leonard says retired crooked gang unit cop Tom Robinson just got caught in a prostitution sting. Yeah, did you guys hear about that? Yeah, the indictments are happening, man. The sheriff down in Osceola County, Florida, he got arrested by the feds for running an illegal gambling ring. So, like I was saying, so with the weed game, how the weed game shifted once that foreign supply got cut off, once that foreign supply of cheap Chinese products and all that bullshit we got being shipped and being imported to the country gets cut off, we're going to have better quality products at a cheaper price. That's what's going to happen. That's what the tariffs is about, and that's what these trade deals are about. And this mass migration thing, that's what that's about. Because another thing that's happening is these crooked politicians that want to open up the borders, they know that eventually the foreign manufacturing supply, the foreign manufactured goods that we're dependent on, will be manufacturing them here in the United States. So they also wanted to pre-position themselves to where there's this large population of poor people, the migrants, the illegals. And this is why they were giving them all that government money, because they knew eventually that money would stop. And when that money stopped, these illegals would then become desperate and they would work for cheap. So what they were doing were they were pre-positioning a new labor force to take over in place of the Americans. All these illegals would have been working under the table, getting underpaid and overworked. And basically the Chinese sweatshops that we hear about would be operating right here domestically in the United States, manned by the illegal aliens. And once again, it would have been a slap in the face to the poor Americans that live in these big liberal sanctuary cities, because them being Americans, thinking they would get first priority for these new manufacturing jobs, they would then be forced out of that market because the illegals would be there taking those jobs and working for less. So with the illegal aliens, what they were doing by bringing them all in was they were creating a new voter bloc and at the same time creating a new slave class. Because the black Americans used to be the slave class when they were when we were underrepresented in education, underrepresented in business ownership, underrepresented in economics. And now that black Americans, mainly black men, more of them have gone into the trades and are turning away from the big colleges and the universities because they don't see the use in it. The trades pay more anyway. What's happening is that large population of unskilled slave labor has now shifted into skilled labor in trades, thus making more money, but leaving a void in the market, in the job markets at the lower levels and at the entry levels. But those jobs like the burger flipping and the grocery bagging and all that shit, those low level jobs were actually meant for teenagers who were just either getting out of high school or were juniors and seniors in high school, but needed a part-time job. That's who those jobs were for. Those are not the types of jobs that were meant for people with parents with children and families to raise their families on. Which is why when I see these fast food workers demanding, increase in minimum wage with having no clue what the ripple effects of that would be, I just kind of shake my head, because again, these fast food, excuse me, these fast food joints, they don't hire these people for their brains. So these are not the smartest people. So any political movement that starts with the burger flippers, you kind of can't take it seriously because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Because they claim they want higher minimum wage because I can't raise a family off $12 an hour and blah 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 blah, which is true, you can't. But that's why you're supposed to get your skills up, get some sort of education, whether it be vocational education or traditional higher education, and move into a higher realm of employment. Because if you stay at the labor level, you'll never be able to live a life beyond that of a laborer. So you can't come in at the low level with very little experience, very little skill, take these unskilled labor jobs and demand plumber money. It don't work like that. If you want plumber money, go get your plumber's license. If you want landscape money, go get into landscaping, start a business. If you want construction money, go work in construction. Those are jobs that you can feed your family off of. Flipping burgers and bagging groceries? No. But you see, again, because most Americans don't understand economics, hell, they don't even understand their own politics. They don't understand economics. So the deep state controllers can wind them up and get them to believe in these bullshit causes that end up hurting them. Because, like Barnes said, they were demanding $25 an hour. But they don't realize that if Burger King starts paying their burger flippers $25 an hour, they're going to have to sell their burgers for $40 a pop. Which means, yeah, your paycheck is going to get fatter, but the amount of money you have to spend out of your paycheck is also going to increase. It's called inflation. Because in order for these businesses to absorb this added cost of higher labor cost, they are going to have to raise their revenue by raising their prices. But again, they don't hire these burger flippers for their smarts. So the burger flippers have no idea that this is a direct effect. It's the same way the Democrats deceive their voters with the whole tax the rich idea. They appeal to the bums with the bum mentality that don't understand that working hard and being smart is what gets you to the top. They think everybody at the top is there because they robbed somebody at the bottom, which is fucking stupid to think in itself. But they believe tax the rich people at the top because that money is then going to be diverted to the poor people. When in reality, it never gets diverted to the poor people. It stays right there in the bank accounts of the politicians. So the rich people get taxed more. And as a result, the rich people have to charge the poor people who utilize their goods and services more. So tax the rich ends up causing an increase in prices for the working class. And this is why in every Democratic city, everything's more expensive. The cost of living's more expensive. The cost of food's more expensive. Gas usually costs more. And you start to wonder, and this is why the people who are economically inept would fall for the communist propaganda that, oh, it's like this because of these poor areas. The rich people want to rob the poor people, so they raise the prices on everything just because they're greedy. But when you look at the politicians that are in charge of these areas, these politicians, most of the time, 9 out of 10 times, are Democrats. And Democrats, when you look at their economic policies, they believe in high taxes. And when you look at these areas where there's high-ass prices coupled with high-ass poverty, like this is what's happening to Orlando over the last few years. High-ass prices with poor-ass people. It ain't the greedy corporations doing it. It's the shitty politicians that are raising the taxes on the corporations, and the corporations are responding by raising their prices in order to pay this new tax bill. That's why you always see higher cost of living and higher food and fuel costs, energy costs in democratically run districts, because they have higher taxes. That's why. And they tell you they're going to tax the rich, but then they don't tax the rich. They tax everybody. You remember when Obama said he was going to raise taxes, and he was going to raise taxes on the rich in his first term? You guys remember that? In 2008, he was talking about the Bush tax cuts, where George W. Bush had cut taxes for the rich people and the poor people across the board. Obama said they're going to differentiate, and they're going to let the Bush tax cuts expire for people making $250,000 a year or more, and everybody below that benchmark, they get to keep their tax cuts. Well, unfortunately, that would have required brand new legislation, because the original legislation was aimed at the entire economy as a whole. So the only way for Obama to allow the Bush tax cuts to expire without renewing them for everybody was to let them expire for everybody. And I remember all the poor people around me in my area, they were all, yay, Obama about to raise taxes on the rich people, yay. And then their fucking taxes went up too. Because again, their ignorance was taken advantage of, because had they not been ignorant to the way the law was written, they would have known the minute Obama said, I'm going to let the Bush tax cuts expire for the rich people, they would have known that was bullshit from the beginning. Because I knew it was bullshit from the beginning. And I was like, oh my God, this guy is about to raise taxes on everybody. And sure enough, he did. And that was around the same time when my thought process was, I'm not taking no job where these motherfuckers could take money out of my check. So what I'll do is I'll find a way to generate my own revenue stream. So that way I get to decide how much of that money comes out and how much of that money stays. I have full control and autonomy over my money. And that's when I got in the streets and got with my brother, got in the streets and started hustling. Because I was like, I'd rather risk jail than play this bullshit slave game with their ass. You know what I'm saying? And, once I had my daughter and I got busted and got 5 years of probation for my charge, and they took all my money and all my guns and shit, I was like, man, I can't do that shit no more, because if I'm getting this kind of money, it ain't worth it if the cops can just walk in here and take it all. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, I need a legitimate way to get my money where I can have all of this, but not have the risk of, the government being able to take it from me just because I'm breaking their rules. So I got to find something to do that's within the rules. So I got into landscaping with my dad. And then when my dad handed me the company, I decided about 5 or 6 years later, I decided to expand into construction. And now I have an outdoor services company where we do landscape and construction. Excuse me. So there's never a shortage of work. Or at least in theory, that's the way it's supposed to go. But I basically been hustling my whole life. You know what I'm saying? I don't play that work a job, have money taken out my check bullshit. I don't play that shit. And the way you manage your taxes is you file your taxes under your LLC or under your S Corp. And whatever your tax bill is, you have an option with the IRS to set up a payment plan. So what you do is you designate part of your budget to pay the IRS every month for the tax bill from the previous year. So let's say you file your taxes in January and you get your tax bill in January, you make your first payment, and then for the next 12 months, you pay off that tax bill with a monthly payment. The IRS will work with you like that. Then by the following year, you file for that previous year, and then you pay every month and you pay off your taxes like that. That's how you stay on top of your taxes. So you have your legitimate tax return, which means provable income. You have your income that's untouched and nobody can take it from you. And you know what I'm saying? And you're good to go. You're rolling. Now, when you're ready to buy a house or get a big loan or whatever, you have provable income and you're self-employed at the same time. And the IRS is not on your back. There's other ways to do it to avoid paying the taxes altogether, but you know, that's kind of a legal gray area that I cannot advise you on because I don't want to lead anybody wrong. You know what I'm saying? But there's ways to figure it out. You do what you do. You know what I mean? Because here's the thing. Whether you pay taxes to the IRS out of your income or not, you're still fucking paying taxes because every time you buy something, there's taxes on it. It's called sales tax. You know what I'm saying? So I believe income tax is double taxation. They should either be income tax or sales tax, one of the other, but there shouldn't be both. And this is what Trump's angling to do too with the tariffs, with the import taxes. He wants to set up the import taxes to raise revenue from all this shit that's being imported to the country and use that revenue to offset the income tax. But unfortunately, it can't be done that way in the current state of things because the government is way too big, way too bloated, and the budget is way too high because there's way too many agencies and operations going on within the government that are unnecessary. And this is why the government shutdown is such a big deal, because with the government shutdown, a lot of the fat within the government is being trimmed. It's kind of like one big experiment where the functionality and operational viability of the government is being put to the test while the funding is limited to see just how well the government could function on a fraction of the revenue it was using to function on before. 100,000 federal workers to resign Tuesday in largest mass departure from U.S. government under Trump administration cuts. Yeah, there's a lot of meaningless positions and useless jobs within the government where people are drawing large salaries and living cushy lifestyles for doing nothing. And they're doing it all on the backs of the taxpayer. And the taxpayer wouldn't have this problem, this financial burden placed on them, if these people and these positions did not exist. Hell, didn't Brandon Johnson just create an office for his side chick in Chicago City Hall and gave her a $200,000 a year position? That's all taxpayers' money. And wasn't Chicago functioning as well as it could before this new position was created? Yeah, it was. So that's an example of how the government is bloated out of control and is a big waste of money. And Trump being a businessman, there's nothing that businessmen hate more than wasting their damn money. And this is all part of the swamp draining. You see, Nasara is on the horizon, right? The full implementation of the National Economic Security and Reformation Act. And that is a complete rewrite of the American economic system to bring us back to what it was under the constitutional republic. Small, efficient government. Most of the governing process over the states was done by the local municipal governments, and the federal government simply provided oversight. The tax system was set up to where people inside the country earning money didn't have to pay taxes. outside of property taxes and perhaps sales taxes on certain items, and the majority of the government revenue came from outside sources, which were importers paying that import tax. And on Main Street, there weren't big corporations hiring entire towns of people where the entire town becomes a boom town once that company is operating, kind of like the auto industry did in Detroit. And then once they pack up and leave and shut down, the entire town now is unemployed. There were no situations, no systems like that. Everybody was self-sufficient, and they were no big major monopolizing corporations. They were more sole proprietorships and small businesses doing trade with one another. So the poor folks that needed employment, there was plenty of jobs to choose from. The young people that were trying to break into the job market and learn a skill or learn a trade and figure out what they wanted to do as a career, their families already owned businesses, and it was a very easy transition to, go from being a child and an observer to being old enough to work in the business, go hands-on, learn the business, and eventually take it over once the parents got too old and retired. And we had a much more productive population. So productive, in fact, we fought a whole fucking civil war and damn near blew the whole shit up and still was able to come back and rebuild the whole thing. You know what I'm saying? You know what kind of money it takes to have and sustain a war? That means when the Civil War was happening, just the mere fact that there were two factions in America that had enough funding and manpower to sustain a war for several years, sustained warfare for several years, means that there was a lot of wealth in the hands of Americans for that to even be possible. Because think about it, right? Let's say, because back then it was the wealthier people in the South that put together through their Masonic lodges, put together their military, and of course, Abraham Lincoln had Ulysses S. Grant. Who was the president? Grant was a general, right? And Lincoln was the president. I'm tripping. I haven't really done a lot of Civil War study, to be honest with you. But nevertheless, you had the president and the power of the federal government. And these wealthy individuals in the South had enough money and funding to challenge the power of the federal government to the point where they had to engage in a couple of years of sustained warfare in order to basically remain in control of the country. That means there was wealth in the hands of the people, and this wealth was generated under the exact system I just described. No income tax, government ran off of tariff money, and individual business owners. Yeah, I believe Grant succeeded Lincoln. I believe Grant came after Lincoln. You know what I'm saying? And now imagine it today where wealthier American citizens decided to organize a citizens militia to challenge the power of the federal government. They wouldn't stand a chance in hell. You want to talk about 2 years of sustained warfare? No, it's going to be like 2 days of straight hellfire and brimstone until the inevitable surrender. Because that type of wealth is no longer in the hands of the people. And what changed? The internal revenue system changed. The taxation system changed, where the federal government would now be funding itself off of money taken from the very same enemy force that would be engaging in civil war with them. So they would essentially be fighting us with our own money. But because so many of us were born into a system where the government steals money out of your paycheck every time you go to work and get paid, people think that shit is okay. People think it's normal. In fact, some people think it's necessary. Some people actually believe that this is necessary. And without it, there'll be no social programs to help people. Listen, I'm going to tell you something right now. Social Security and retirement benefits is bullshit. In fact, the entire welfare system is bullshit. Yeah, it helps a lot of people. It sure does. But you know what it also does? It helps people who don't deserve that help. Let me explain to you what I mean. Me and my brother had a debate one time, and he was like, I would like to gain some wealth because I want to help people. There's a lot of people struggling, and I want to just be able to put some money in their pockets to help them get out of that hole. You know what I mean? Because when I was in that hole, I wished for somebody to come along and do that for me. So I'll be that for someone else if I had the opportunity to. And you know what I said to him? I said, fuck them poor people. He was like, what? I can't believe you're saying that. How could you be so heartless? No, I said, no, listen, fuck those poor people. Here's why. Because they live in America, and America is the land of opportunity. And I know a lot of people who came, every excuse that one can make up for why they're poor. I know a successful person who had to overcome all of those exact same challenges and more, and they still succeeded individually without selling their soul or giving up their booty. So any excuse that a poor person can give you for being poor, there's somebody else who could have used that same excuse, but they didn't. So that means that those excuses are not legitimate reasons, because if someone else could do it, you could do it. And it sounds harsh and it sounds fucked up, but it's the truth. So when you look at a capitalist system like our Main Street economy is capitalism, right? Again, in capitalism, the two traits it takes to make it to the top is to be smart and to work hard. Be hardworking. Don't be lazy. Don't be stupid. Because only the stupid and the lazy remain at the bottom. So when you see people at the bottom as a capitalist, your first assumption should be, this is either a lazy person or this is a stupid person. And if I use the resources that I earned from remaining steadfast in being smart and working hard to get to where I'm at, if I take my resources and I put them in the hands of this stupid and or lazy person, what's going to happen is this person is going to squander and waste my resources, and it will not change their position in life. It will do nothing to improve their situation. In fact, for a lot of them, it might make it worse. And that's because they simply don't have what it takes to make it to the top. They haven't cracked the code yet. They think they can take the easy way and be lazy. As long as they got good ideas, they'll make it. They think that if they keep going to work with a smile and working as hard as they can, eventually boss man's going to give them that 10-cent raise. That's the way they think. And they'll never they'll never get any farther than that because they can't see that there's anything beyond that. So when you put the money, if you put $10,000 in their hand, they're going to treat it like it's going to last forever, spend it all, and it'll be gone. And essentially it would have amounted to nothing improving in their lives, but you being $10,000 poorer. But let's say it's somebody that's just down on their luck and legitimately needs a break, because those people are out there too. There's poor folks out there that if you put 10 grand in their hand, they're not going to be poor very long. And neither will their kids or their grandkids. You know what I mean? So those would be the people that I would focus my attention and put my energy into. You know what I'm saying? Let's say it's a guy, he's in his late 20s, got divorced. The ex-wife took him for everything, lost his business and all that. Now he's bagging groceries at the grocery store, but every day he goes to work thinking of a way to elevate himself and get back on top, because he's a real hustler, right? So he's starting from the bottom. He's back nickel and diamond again. But eventually he's going to get it. He's going to start seeing them birds again, right? So let's say you get to chatting with him and he's got, all these plans and shit. And you say, you know what, brother? Here's my number. Give me a call when you get out of work, blah, 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 blah. Then you meet up with him. You give him a check for 10,000. You say, hey, put that into your business and go get your shit going. You know what I'm saying? And you give it to that person. That person has a plan. They have something mapped out in their head that they're going to do with it, because they're not stupid. They're smart enough to think that, hey, I need to find a different avenue, and there are different avenues. I just have to explore and find which one works and what it's going to cost me to get there. And once that person has that mentality and you put that bread in their hands, they're going to take that shit and they're going to hit the ground running. But let's say it's somebody who's bagging groceries at the grocery store and has no plans of starting a business or anything. They just want to work there till they retire. Like, that's their career for the rest of their lives. There's people like that. You put 10,000 in his hand, he's going to be eating crab legs, taking vacations, smoking Newports again. He's going to go from drinking what's a cheap liquor? Drinking Amsterdam to cognac or Don Julio. You know what I'm saying? He's gonna buy himself a whole bunch of fresh clothes and shit, maybe a nice new car or something, and before you know it, that money's gone and his life hasn't changed. He's just still the bag man at the grocery store, just a bag man with a bunch of fly shit now. But no money spent on anything that's going to generate any value in the future. And unfortunately, in America, because this is the mentality that the public school system instills in us, be a good slave. Most Americans have that mentality. So amongst the populations of poor Americans, you will find that a majority of poor Americans are there because they either, one, they want to be there, they're happy being there. Life gets complicated if it gets too good. Success brings fear, so they self-sabotage and they remain in a state of failure. They're too lazy to do better. They don't want to put in the work. Or they're too stupid to even realize that if they did put in the work, they'd make it. And then from that group, there's a small, tiny population that's just there temporarily and are going to elevate past that eventually because their mentality is different. And for a lot of us, before we became successful, that was our, that we were that few. And if it wasn't us, it was our parents. Because I damn sure didn't grow up rich, and I damn sure ain't rich now. But I wouldn't consider myself a poor person either. Because I've been there, man. I think everybody's been there. Just knowing what it's like to not have money. And knowing what it's like to not have money gives you an appreciation for money when you do get it. Thus, you're less likely to spend it because you like knowing that it's there better than you like what it can afford you. I'm one of those types of people. But I was telling them, don't think like that. Don't try to be a philanthropist and help the poor, because you're going to be disappointed, because you're going to expect more from these people than they're willing to do for themselves. And there's nothing worse than wanting more for someone than they want for themselves. There's no worse feeling than that in the world. And if you're a parent, every parent's gone through that with their kids. You got this dumbass motherfucker that keeps doing stupid shit and getting in trouble in school, but he's so goddamn smart. You know that he could be better and do better, but he's about to get himself expelled. You know, it's kind of like that. And thinking that that type of philanthropy is going to bring you happiness, it's going to bring you more depression. It's going to make you sad. You're going to be constantly disappointed. Some people you have to let sink. And this is why there will always be a slave class. And this is why all that communist talk about equality and all that bullshit, it's bullshit. This is why. Because there will never be equality if everybody is not equally minded, if everybody doesn't share the same equal amount of ambition for themselves. And we don't. So there will never be equality. There will always be a few that make it to the top and the majority that stay at the bottom. That's the way that's just the way of the world, you know? And it's the same in the animal kingdom. Whenever there's a highly intelligent animal that can do some amazing shit that most other animals of that same species can't do, that animal is something special. And that's because the vast majority of the rest of the animals are average and below. And that's how it is. That's how it is with people. And that's the, you know, and it's not until those people, one by one as individuals, start to realize that, hey, I can do more, that you'll start to see that situation, the dynamics amongst that population start to change. You know, on the graph, on the economic graph, the poor bar would be going down because more poor people are going to learn how to break out of poverty once they realize what's keeping them there. And this is why, again, the Democrat propaganda is always aimed at poor people, because it's always about passing the blame. You're not poor because you're an idiot. You're poor because the racist Republicans want to, they're robbing you. That's why you're poor. You know, you're not poor because you're an idiot. You're poor because the racist white man is keeping you down, and he rigged the system against you. That's why you're poor. You're not poor because we're taxing the shit out of you and taxing the shit out of your boss. That's why the food at your restaurant costs so damn much. No, you're not poor because of that. You're poor because your crooked, greedy boss wants to keep all the money for himself. You see? So as long as they keep making you believe that your economic situation is due to something beyond your, primarily due to something beyond yourself, you will never see those obstacles simply as challenges to overcome. You start to see those obstacles as impenetrable barriers that keep you limited. Thus, you begin to limit yourself because they've limited your thinking. And what happens is when people start to limit themselves by limiting their thinking, the government then slips in and says, hey, we can do that thinking for you. Hey, we can create an agency that can fix this problem you have. And the more problems you have is the more power they get, because the more you look to them to solve your problems. Why do you think the Democrats always pretend as if government's the solution to every problem? Because that affords the government the opportunity to seize more power, take away more rights. And so what happens is these average and below minded people start agreeing to the government getting more power and taking more power and setting up an office for this and an agency for that and passing new laws. And now they need new enforcement of these laws. And before you know it, you got this big bloated government machine that 90% of it serves absolutely no purpose except to be a financial drain on the country. And now you got all these taxes being taken from people to fund all this nonsense. And then the people turn around and wonder why we're having the problems we're having. And on one side, you got the Democrats saying, we need more of this government bloating. And on the other side, you got the Republicans saying, no, we need to get rid of this government bloating. And yet people still turn around and vote for the Democrats because even with such a simplistic explanation, they still don't get it. They still don't get it. And this is why when you look at the news and the media and they're talking about Trump and the government shutdown, they're selling it as if it's something to be afraid of, like it's something to be terrified of. Trump is this big bad monster that shut down the country and he's firing people and stopping their paychecks and all because they don't agree with him politically. No, that's not it. That's not it. Trump is setting the stage for you to take home all of your money on your paycheck. That's what he's doing. And the first step to doing that is by cutting the costs that justifies taking that money out of your paycheck. You get rid of the justification for the money. You get rid of the need for that money. Thus, the people get to keep their fucking money. So everybody that's on Main Street complaining about Trump and what he's doing with the government shutdown and thinning out the government by firing all these people and getting rid of all these people, they're actually advocating for higher taxes, which goes back to the point I was making on the previous show. They're actually helping to support and prop up the same system they complain about every day. That's what they're doing. That's what they're being led to do. And most of them, again, are too stupid to even see that. And it's sad to watch. It really is. But that's the way the country is. And this is why there's no benefit to trying to quote unquote help the poor. America in capitalism, it's not up to the wealthy. It's not up to the fortunate to help the unfortunate. It's up to the fortunate to provide opportunity for the unfortunate, but it's up to the less fortunate to help themselves. This is why it kills me when black people say, oh, they say pull yourself up by your bootstrap, but what if you ain't got no boots? Like, just the fact that you exist in America, that's your boot, dummy. So you don't have to literally have boots on your feet, but just the fact that you're in America means that there's an opportunity to do something. I seen a video, right, where this guy, I believe he was homeless or he was about to be homeless. He was getting evicted or something like that. And he decided, he got the bright idea to go out on a street corner and hold up a sign and beg for money because he heard that at the right corners, it could be pretty lucrative. And I believe that. I think them bums be getting paid because they be out there faithfully like they getting paid. But anyway, but instead of holding up a sign, begging for money, he held up a sign saying, here, take a copy of my resume. And he had to use the last little bit of money he had, printed up several copies of his resume, and was basically getting attention from people who own businesses who could give him an opportunity. Because he could have went out there and begged for money and raised his rent money and paid his rent and been done with it. But then the next month he would have been back in the same hole. But he played it smart. And within, I want to say, a day or two, he landed a full-time job that paid him better than his last job. And he didn't even get hired because of his experience. You know why the guy said he hired him? The guy said he hired him because he appreciated the fact that he was creative enough to come up with an idea to market himself that way. He liked the way he marketed himself. He thought it was a brilliant way to market himself, and he wanted that level of brilliance working for his company. You see how that works? So that guy could have easily been like, "Oh, they fired me and I can't get a job, and I need the government. I need the government to pay for my life." You know, he could have did that, right? Or he could have been like, "Oh, the white man at my job fired me from my job," and da 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 da. And he could have made every excuse in the world. I'm getting evicted and I don't know what to do. And da, da, da. He could have made any excuse in the world. But what did he do? He understood that he was in the land of opportunity. And he found a way to take advantage of those opportunities. He understood that, hey, I'm in America. There's millions of companies operating in America. And I can get a job with any one of these companies, but I have to make myself visible. So instead of making myself visible to ask for shit, I'm going to make myself visible and try to sniff out one of these opportunities. And it worked. And he started living better than he was living before he found himself in that position. You know what I'm saying? When I moved out of Florida and I moved to the Midwest, when I first got here, I didn't have much, right? Maybe a couple $1,000, whatever. And I had to get a job because I couldn't bring all my equipment with me. I didn't have my business established yet, whatever. So I started working for a company in the same field. And I was making $500 a week. You know how long that shit lasted? A month. I worked 4 weeks. And within 4 weeks, I had found myself back in Florida, bringing my shit up, getting my business established. And by month 2, I was making 3 to 4 times the money I was making on that job. I could have sat on my ass and made excuses. But I could have been happy and settled in and been like, hey, you know, I'm making enough to live, so fuck it, I'll just stay like this. No, I hated that shit because I knew how much money I could make, and that's what drove me. Because I felt like this was below my level of expertise and my level of experience, but I accepted it because it was necessary and it was temporary. But once I was able to establish my business, I hit the ground running because I ain't no goddamn bum. Now I am in direct competition with the company that I started out working for. I mean, like direct competition. Now I can go sit at the table and negotiate with my old boss because I'm a boss too. He just didn't know that at the time because, well, I had to be humble and play my position and not burn that bridge. Now, if I wanted, I could sell him my company and sell him all my contracts and cash out and maybe not retire, but I'd have to invest into something else. Sometimes I wonder about that, if I should do that and use that money and go straight into real estate investing. Because the Midwest is a pretty sweet market right now. You know, I ponder about that all the time. All the time. Maybe I'll look around and see what kind of offers I get. And depending on the offers I get, that'll determine the decision I make. Because if I sell my company, I'll tell you one thing, I have a hell of a lot more time to build my channel up. That's for sure. Because then I could do maybe a 1-hour daily show Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, just go live Saturday night or something. You know what I'm saying? But nevertheless, I just got all these ideas just flowing through my head. You know what I'm saying? But nevertheless, America is the land of opportunity, but a lot of that opportunity has been stolen from us. And it's been stolen from us by these one world government goons that want to maintain total control. And the reason why they use the Democratic Party and their bad economic policies to keep everybody broke is because look at how Donald Trump became president. He had enough money to fund his own campaign, which means they couldn't buy him off It's very hard to buy rich people. They couldn't buy him off. And so he was able to buck the system because he wasn't financially dependent on the system. You see how that works? And the more Americans that put themselves in position to have that kind of money and that kind of power means that we will pose a threat to their power. So in order to eliminate that threat, they're basically doing what Pharaoh did when he went out and killed the firstborn boy in all of Egypt. The firstborn Hebrew boy. This is why this was why he did that, because there was someone from amongst that group that was going to be a threat to his power. And it's the same way the establishment views the American people. There's someone from among that group that if that group is allowed to prosper and make money, and we allow them to learn how to do trades and do business and invest and shit like that, too many of them are going to get too rich too quickly, and then they're going to want power. Because the way it works is the human psyche is unpleasable. You'll never reach this is why addiction and things like that exist, because you'll never reach the point where you're satisfied with what you have. So you can make and it takes a lot of discipline to be satisfied. This is why they say contentment is an art, right? Because once you make a certain amount of money, you're now looking at the next level. Once you hit 100,000, because you start off small, say, hey, I just want to make 100,000 and get out. You hit 100,000, you say, hey, I just want to make 1 million and get out. You hit 1 million, you say, hey, I just want to make 10 million and get out. And then before you know it, you're in it. Freeway Ricky Ross, the big crack dealer out of LA, he talked about that. He said when he started selling cocaine, he just wanted to make $5,000 and that was it. And this man ended up building an empire that made millions a day. So what happens is, as these people from amongst the American populace start to take advantage of the economic opportunities provided to them, too many of them are going to get rich too quickly. And once they get rich, that need for more is going to kick in. And once you make all the money there is to make in the world, the next thing you're going to desire is the power. And then once you get the power, you're going to want to keep that power and maintain the control. So naturally, just by the way of human nature, if too many people got rich too quickly, they would pose a threat to the power structure. So we eliminate that by passing bad economic policies, poisoning the mind of the people to not think in a way that leads them to economic success, rig the school system so it emphasizes compliance over intelligence, propagandize them to think that there's forces beyond their control that's stymieing their economic growth, and will use individuals who've exceeded their lower economic status to convince them that there's forces beyond their control to stymie their economic growth, because they'll already be stupid. Now we just have to make them believe this other stupid shit. And thus we have the American society we have today, with all these stupid, lazy people that blame everything else for their economic situation but themselves. And that does nothing but serve the establishment, because they perpetuate the mentality that we will never have power, or we can never have power. And thus they never seek to seize that power from the corrupt forces who currently hold that power. And then the worst ones are those gatekeepers that are tasked with keeping you in that mentality, teaching you that you'll never make it in life because there's always some force there stopping you from making it, when the only force stopping you from making it is your mind, your mentality. And even for the people who put in the effort and try, you have to have the wisdom to acknowledge the mistakes you made. Like when I first got into business, I used to underbid on a lot of jobs, and I'll do all this work and spend all this money and end up making $100 a day or something stupid like that for myself. And I realized that, hey, this work is worth a lot more money than what I'm charging, so I have to charge more. So I started learning ways to properly price the jobs, and I started pricing the jobs, and I started making money because I learned from my mistakes. And there's some that are smart enough to start that business, go into business, but they're not wise enough to learn from the mistakes that they make because they carry this mentality into business with them that there's forces beyond my control that are causing certain things to happen in my life that I can't, in my business, with my finances, that I can't control. And so what happens is when these mistakes happen and they lose money, they look for every other reason why they lost money, except, you know what, had I done this differently or that differently, I would have actually made money. You know what I'm saying? But the whole point of it is, it's all about, when it comes to the two factions within the government. One faction, the Trump side, we want free thinking, hardworking, smart Americans that will build themselves up, build their legacies, build wealth, build up their households, build up their future generations, so we can have strong families, which results in having a strong nation. The other side, which would be the Trump haters and those who want you to hate Trump, what they want is a weak, dumbed down, enslaved society, kind of like what we've had thus far. And if you're not satisfied with the way society is going, that's because we're getting deeper into that weakness, that stupidness, that dumbed downedness, which is further adding to our enslavement. You see what I'm saying? And that's problematic. So here's an example of one of those people that are tasked with making you believe that there are forces beyond your control that are stopping you from making progress in your own personal life, that are impenetrable barriers rather than challenges to overcome. Excuse me. Eric Doherty says, in an insane move, Justice Ketanji Jackson declares we need to draw congressional districts based on race because Black people are like disabled people. They don't have equal access to the voting system. They're disabled. This is utter madness. How did she get on the Supreme Court? And if you guys go watch this Supreme Court hearing, what's happening at the Supreme Court hearing is, I believe it is the voting rights, the 1965 Voting Rights Act that's being challenged because it was put in place to stop racist white people from creating bullshit rules that prevented Black voters from voting. We don't have that problem today. So I can understand wanting to get rid of it, right? And the point is that the justices are supposed to ask questions of the litigants to understand each litigant's case. So when it's time for them to make their ruling, they have all the facts of both sides. Ketanji Brown Jackson, instead of listening to the case of the party that was trying to, I guess, stop the redrawing of the congressional districts based on race because it's racist. Instead of listening to the man's argument, she sat there and debated with him and argued with him about his point. which was absolutely stupid. Like, this woman literally showed how stupid she was. And it was gut-wrenching to see, because as a black person, it was embarrassing. My kind of paradigmatic example of this is something like the ADA. That's the Americans with Disabilities Act. Congress passed the ADA against the backdrop of a world generally not accessible to people with disabilities. Why is that not what's happening here? So she's saying that black people don't have access to voting, which makes them which puts them in the same category as disabled people. Now, when it comes to civil rights, minority races, mainly black people, because they were the main victims of segregation in the Jim Crow South and whatnot. Black people have faced some hardships in this country and did deserve protections under the law, just like disabled people would deserve protections under the law in terms of accommodations. So there is a bit of a point to be made there with comparing black people to disabled people. But when it comes to voting, that's not the case. And to compare black people to disabled people when it comes to voting is not a good look for a black Supreme Court justice to be saying about black people. In fact, it's offensive. Because having proper accommodations is one thing in public spaces. That's one thing. Being able to vote is something totally different, and there's no impediments stopping black people from voting. But that disabled person that can't walk, steps are an impediment. Thus, handicap ramps need to be installed. That will never change. But black people not being welcomed into certain public spaces by racist white people, well, that has changed. So when it comes to being able to go vote, black people have the same right and affordability to vote as white people. There is no fundamental difference. So to compare black people to disabled people when it comes to voting would be no different than those white liberals saying we can't have voter ID laws. Voter ID laws are racist because black people are too incompetent to get IDs. That's basically what this argument is when she says that black people are disabled. Yeah, she's a plant. And that idea that black people are disabled means that black people are victims, and there's forces within society that are stopping black people from progressing. Like, this feeds that victimhood mentality, that it's somebody else's fault. And this is her right here, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, U.S. Supreme Court. Justices hear case on whether majority black congressional districts is racial gerrymandering. It is racial gerrymandering, and she's all in favor of the racial gerrymandering. But thank you, Joe Biden, for putting her in office. Now, this one's a funny one because we already know every man that calls himself a Democrat got some gay in him, or at least at some point had some gay in him. And Hakeem Jeffries is no different. All of these Democratic males, because here's the thing. The Democratic Party is so friggin' gay friendly. They're like overly gay friendly. They're not even like cool, we accept you, you're one of us, whatever. They're more like they worship gay people as their gods, damn near. And any man that's a straight man would not be comfortable in an environment like that, where gay people are viewed in this victimhood, with this, through this lens of victimhood status, and they deserve special treatment. Like, straight men don't think that way. We treat women that way, right? But when it comes to other gay men, like we just view them as other men. So there's no need to treat these other men with any kind of special, give them any kind of special treatment. But the men of the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is anti-masculinity, these men are anti-masculinity, which means essentially they're male feminists. And well, as we've seen time and time again, they're constantly being suspected of being homosexuals. Hakeem Jeffries to lead world's largest gay rights rally in D.C. this weekend. Rumors swirl of historic coming out at No King's protest. So, I guess Hakeem Jeffries is supposed to, or he was supposed to come out this weekend. Did anybody catch it? I just thought this was hilarious. Like, bro, you're a Democrat. Like, we could have guessed it. We could have guessed it. Now, speaking of Democrats, here's Bernie Sanders, Mamdani, who's running for, I think his name is like Zoran Mamdani. He's running for the mayor of New York City with the full backing of the Democratic Party. And this is supposed to be AOC, if I'm not mistaken. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doesn't look like her at all, but I believe that is her, or that's supposed to be her. And it says, a Jewish socialist, that'd be Bernie Sanders, a Muslim socialist, that'd be Mamdani, and Latina socialist, that would be her, walk into a bar. So who's paying the bill? Because socialists believe that somebody else is responsible for the expenses they incur. That's socialism, right? So who's paying the bill? And speaking of Mamdani and socialism, this is what I'm talking about Democrats with their high-ass taxes. Let me see if I can find slide 9. No. There it is. There it is. That's his name. Hey, guys, hit the Cash App, support the show, man. We got no support tonight. Everybody, the 2 names I shouted out were like from past shows. We got 0 on the board tonight. I don't know what's happening. Y'all playing games with your boy, man. Support the show. Shout out to my Rumble people. Where my Rumble people at? All right, so Zoran Mamdani assures New Yorkers nobody will pay more than 94% tax if elected as mayor. Yeah, right. The tab's mine. You see that? Nobody will pay more than 94% tax. The fuck you mean 94% tax? In an exclusive CNN interview with Phil McCracken, New York City mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani addressed concerns over his progressive tax proposal, insisting no New Yorker would face a tax rate above 94%. The wealthy can contribute more to support our city's urgent needs, Mamdani told CNN, outlining plans to blah, 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 blah. So he is one of those tax the rich idiots. And he really said with a straight face more than 94%. So he wants to tax wealthy New Yorkers at 94% of their profits. That is insane. But he made headlines when him and all the other Democratic candidates had to sit there and they were asked about what they would do. First thing they would do as mayor or whatever. And all the other candidates said they will go to Israel. And he said he would stay right there in New York and deal with New York's issues, which I can appreciate him standing on business and with the fuck Israel thing. But he's still pushing the same agenda that all those Israel suckers would be pushing too. So it doesn't really matter how he feels, how he expresses his thoughts on Israel, or what thoughts he express on Israel or not. What matters is the bullshit policies that he's going to try to push, which involve more high taxes. This is what I mean when I tell you guys these Democrats believe in high taxes. The tax the rich theory. It's a false theory. It's communist, it's communistic and socialistic. And it does not, it leads to poverty. The more money you have to give to the government is the less money you have to put back into the economy. Thus, taxes never work. If you want this economy to get better overnight, if the IRS were to say, you know what, we're going to put a freeze on all taxes for 30 days. So all revenue earned within the next 30 days, nobody pays any taxes on. You get to take home all of your money. Watch how quick things turn around economically, simply because people get to keep their fucking money. But this is a prime example of why shit's so expensive in New York City. Everybody complains about how expensive things are in New York City. This is why. This is why. And as all these issues are being exposed and addressed, you got these groups that are organizing and funding individuals to go out and commit violence against Americans, commit violence against law enforcement, all in an effort to keep this socialism going, to keep this stupidity going. And they've been thoroughly brainwashed to believe that the people who want to stop this stupidity, this madness, are actually working against their best interest, when it's the other way around. So now these people are fighting against their own best interest. Shout out to Elsine with the Cash App. She says, I hear you fell asleep at 9:50, just woke up. I appreciate it, Elsine. Shout out to you, Elsine. Thank you. I said a whole lot more before you heard me begging for money. So if that's all you heard, I hope it didn't leave a bad taste in your mouth, but I appreciate the support. We got one, y'all. We got one. Let's make them count. So what Trump is doing with the military is he's going after these individuals that are basically pulling the strings on these domestic terrorist groups. And as a result, what we're seeing is what we're seeing in the media. The persistent government shutdown to cut off the funding, the military deployment, and then politicians getting indicted. In fact, Cory Booker it was either Cory Booker or Hakeem Jeffries, one of the two, had put out an ad in Craigslist trying to conceal that it was them that did it. And it was a Craigslist ad offering to pay $12,000 a week to somebody who would be willing to recruit groups of people to go out and basically commit acts of domestic terrorism against ICE officers. And that Craigslist ad was traced back to either Cory Booker or Hakeem Jeffries, one of the two of them. They're both one and the same to me. So that's an example of oh man. So that's an example of one of those networks that operate illegally for the intent of committing illegal acts and violating the law and committing violence, being tied back to a politician. And this is why we're seeing these indictments. Because the ones that we are seeing are an indicator of what we're not seeing. The ripples, those are the ripples on the surface of the water, and it's an indication that we got a fish on at the bottom of the water, beneath the surface. More than likely, local politicians that are acting as intermediaries when it comes to distributing the funding to these non-governmental organizations. Or maybe even directly to criminal groups. Who knows? This is the deep state. These are the roundups. Let me see. I thought I had gotten all the slides in order, but I didn't. So, John Bolton. So, if you guys aren't aware, John Bolton was a Trump cabinet member when he was doing the negotiations with North Korea. And John Bolton is a Bush Republican, which means he would be on the side of the Never Trumpers. And it's a bit of a mystery as to why Trump would hire this guy as a national security advisor during his negotiations with a hostile nation like North Korea. Because John Bolton was involved in the orchestration of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. He also played a role in Libya and Syria. And possibly might even go as far back as the Iraq and Kuwait war, the one that happened around the time of Desert Storm. But nevertheless, that's neither here nor there. John Bolton, when Trump was asked, why did you hire John Bolton to be your national security advisor during your negotiations with North Korea? Trump answered, and he said that John Bolton is the type of guy you want to have at the table with you when you're threatening somebody, when you're threatening to go to war with somebody, because he was there when the threat to go to war in Iraq and Afghanistan was made, and the war actually happened. So in the eyes of North Korea, they don't see the separation between me and John Bolton. They just see two Americans. And with John Bolton, they see a guy that when war is put on the table, if he's sitting at that table, that war happens. So John Bolton was basically there to be the tag dog on the chain, to menace the enemy, to make them believe that Trump was really about that, and would really do that. And it worked because North Korea capitulated, right? So everything's been all good since then, at least with North Korea. But later on, John Bolton just recently gets raided by the FBI and then indicted. John Bolton, former National Security Advisor, indicted in classified documents probe. Classified documents probe. You mean a classified documents probe like what they did to Trump when they raided his house in Mar-a-Lago? That classified document probe? I don't know. Perhaps. But here's some details. So let's look at the details. On October 16th, 2025, former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton was indicted in Maryland on 18 federal charges related to his handling of classified national defense information. The charges allege that Bolton illegally transmitted classified information to unauthorized individuals and unlawfully retained classified documents and files at his home. Indictment details. Charges. A federal grand jury returned the 18-count indictment. The charges include 8 counts of unlawfully transmitting national defense information and 10 counts of unlawfully retaining such information. Unauthorized sharing. The indictment claims that Bolton sent more than 1,000 pages of diary-like entries containing classified information to 2 unauthorized individuals using his personal email and a non-governmental messaging application. The information was classified up to the top secret, sensitive, compartmented information level. Sources told CNN that the recipients were his wife and daughter. Damn. Oh, thank you, LC, and I appreciate the other Cash App. Thank you, my sister. Unsecured storage. After leaving his position in September 2019, Bolton allegedly kept classified documents at his home in Maryland. Federal investigators seized hard copies and digital files of these diary entries during a search of his home and office in August 2025. So let me get this straight. What year was the Trump raid? Was the Mar-a-Lago raid? I'll look it up. So in case anybody else is looking it up, just put it in the chat, but I'll look it up. What year was Mar-a-Lago raided? (2022). So Mar-a-Lago was raided in 2022. Let's see. What year did John Bolton leave government? John Bolton last left a government position in 2019. He was removed from his role as National Security Advisor by then President Donald Trump on September 10th of that year. Okay, I remember now. This is when Trump used him for the North Korean negotiations and then immediately fired him after that. Yeah, that's what that is. That's what that is. So John Bolton basically would have had these classified documents since 2019. The FBI raided Trump's house in 2022. Now, here we are in 2025. Trump's FBI raids John Bolton's house and finds the exact thing that the FBI claimed they were looking for in Trump's house in 2022. Well, my question is, if they were so gung-ho on finding these missing classified documents, why didn't they raid John Bolton since John Bolton had documents, but yet they raid Trump in 2022? Why didn't they raid John Bolton? He actually had them. They didn't raid John Bolton until Trump got in office, because John Bolton is one of them. So they'll raid Trump and blame him for what they know John Bolton's doing. And remember, Joe Biden had all the classified documents in his garage. Remember that shit? With the fake Biden presidency? That shit's funny. The next show, we're going to revisit that shit. We have to revisit that because people are starting to catch on now. I'm starting to see Instagram reels with like shit from my slides that I was showing you guys since 2021. So I love it. I think it's great. It took a little while, but you know, I've been in this situation before where I debated Bro Sanchez about the border in like 2018, 2019. And by 2025, I was proven right, you know, so I get it. It takes time. But anyway, nevertheless, John Bolton gets raided guilty of the exact same thing that the Biden administration was trying to put on Trump. Ain't that something? After leaving his position in September 2019, Bolton allegedly kept classified documents at his home in Maryland. Federal investigators seized hard copies and digital files of these diary entries during a search of his home and office in August 2025. Yep, that's when he got raided. Iranian hack. According to prosecutors, a cyber attack believed to be tied to the Iranian government hacked one of Bolton's personal email accounts in 2021, which contained some of the classified material he had transmitted. So the Iranians told on him. It's funny how they keep telling us America's enemies with Iran, but somehow Iran keeps catching these motherfuckers and telling America on them. That should tell you something right there. Because they tell us Russia and the United States are enemies, China and the United States are enemies, but yeah, China had some spies over here in the universities and shit, but they're gone now. They've been wiped out. They've been rounded up. So there's alliances where they say there's tension, and there's actually tension where they tell us there's alliances. I mean, this is a common theme where everything is backwards from what it appears to be, so it's to be expected. It's never beyond the realm of possibility that that's what's actually happening. And if you guys want to know more about the Trump's airstrikes on Iran, I actually did a stream covering that when Trump bombed Iran. He was basically doing them a favor, like literally doing them a favor, because what I did was I selected, first I showed the entire list of all the nuclear facilities in Iran, and it was about 13 or 16 or something like that. And they took out 3, and they still had more than 10 still operating. And not only that, the 3 that the Americans bombed just so happened to be 3 that were reconstructed and relocated and reconstructed in a different location. And the locations that were bombed by the Americans were the old sites. So essentially, because ideally what you'd want to do is when you have a super secure facility like that, you want to destroy everything, and you don't want to leave any traces of what was done there. So the best thing to do would be to demolish the place once you move out. And it would cost the Iranians a lot of money to demolish the place. But in an effort to kiss up to Israel, Trump basically made a backdoor deal with Iran to demolish those old sites for them. But Iran had to agree to make it look like the Americans bombed them and have it reported in the news as if the Americans committed an aggressive act of war against them, when in reality they didn't. So Trump made the deal with the Iranians. The Iranians agreed. Trump went ahead and demolished the nuclear sites. Our news reported, hey, 3 nuclear sites were bombed. To come to find out, those nuclear sites don't exist at those locations anymore. And life goes on. Everybody believes the narrative, and life goes on. It was actually pretty cleverly done, to tell you the truth. But anyway, political backdrop. The indictment comes as John Bolton has been an outspoken critic of Donald Trump, who returned to the presidency in 2025. Bolton is the 3rd prominent Trump critic to be indicted in recent weeks. Yeah, the Trump critics are the criminals, because when the president is legitimately going after the criminals, of course the criminals are going to critique him. And they have to critique him if they're going to run around pretending as if they're not the criminals. Bolton's defense. In a statement, Bolton's lawyer, Abby Lowell, hey, that's the same lawyer that represented Letitia James and somebody else that got indicted. It's like the same lawyer with everybody. This is not the first time we've heard that name. Abby Lowell said that the underlying issues were investigated and resolved years ago. Lowell maintained that the diary entries were unclassified and known to the FBI since 2021. Abe Lowell, sorry. He added that keeping diaries is not a crime. Well, keeping diaries with classified information is, buddy. Let me see. Let me see. I think it's Letitia James that he's representing. Abe Lowell. Yep. Bald-headed Jew, 73 years old. Columbia University. Let's see his client list. Oh, so he so this is what so I type in Abe Lowell clients list, right? You know what? Let's do it on the computer. Let me see if it pulls up on the computer because that'd be more fun, won't it? Won't it, guys? That's more fun. Why, yes, it is. Why, yes, it is. Welcome, 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 welcome to the show, everybody. All right, here we go. What are we searching? Oh, right. Ha, there it is. There we go. Oh, it's giving me a different answer than on my phone. That's really weird. That is really weird. Because on the phone, it gives me this first part, but here where it says current high profile clients, on my phone, it says notable recent and current clients, and then it's got a whole. Excuse me. Okay, it's the same list of names, but it's all configured different. All right. So, as of late 2025, Abe Lowell has taken on numerous clients who are challenging actions by the new Donald Trump administration. Oh, so he's the white knight that's going to fight against Trump. Got it. Got it. Ah, he's representing Adam Schiff as well. Not surprised. Yes, and Letitia James. In May 2025, he left his position at Winston and Strawn to launch his own firm, Lowell and Associates. Lowell and Associates will get you sent to jail. With the specific intent of representing individuals targeted by the administration. Okay, so he's the guy. He's the guy that's defending Trump's political enemies, basically. So he's the deep state defense attorney, pretty much. Wow, Peter Johnson, Hunter Biden's attorney too? Well, I'm not surprised. I just wanted to see if my memory served me correctly. And Letitia James was on the list, but Lisa Cook, we covered Lisa Cook, the Federal Reserve governor who got fired, and she's challenging Trump in court for being fired, but she committed mortgage fraud just like Letitia James. Susan Monares, CDC director, retained Lowell in August 2025 after she was fired for what her lawyers claim were political reasons. Lowell's firm argues her termination was legally deficient. Yeah, but they're getting indicted. That's what's going to happen. New York Attorney General Letitia James hired Lowell in 2025 after the Trump administration referred her to the Justice Department for a criminal investigation. So Letitia James, Mark Zaid, I don't know who this is, a client of Lowell and Associates in litigation against the administration. I don't know who that is. Miles Taylor, represented by Lowell in litigation challenging federal retaliation. Former DOJ employees, Lowell filed a lawsuit on behalf of 3 former Department of Justice employees who were illegally fired. Whatever. Hunter Biden, Ivanka Trump, and Jared Kushner. Holy cow. Oh, shit. You know what? I know what's happening here. I know what's happening here. Lowell, get this. Lowell is a plant by Trump himself. You see right here? Other notable past clients. Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. He represented the former president's daughter and son-in-law during the Russia investigation. And during the Russia investigation was when Trump was exposing that the deep state was spying on him. So Lowell has been making the rounds in in the political circles for quite a while. And here's the thing. Those lawyers that work for the deep state, they would never work for the Trumps. Not because they wouldn't want to, but because Trump wouldn't hire them. Especially after the whole Michael Cohen situation went down with Stormy Daniels. Yeah, no more dealings with you. This is why he kept Alina Habba as his lawyer through all the criminal bullshit and the lawsuits and shit. But he had this guy Lowell in his pocket the whole time because he knew once he started going after these deep state players, he would have his boy Lowell go ahead and represent the people in the deep state that he's going after to ensure that he torpedoes their cases. Because while Letitia James was under investigation, remember Lowell was the one that was publicly saying that Letitia James shouldn't be indicted because the crime that she committed was before she became attorney general and now she has immunity or some shit like that. And when it comes to Lisa Cook, he said the same thing with her mortgage fraud. He said when the mortgage fraud was committed, that was long before she became Federal Reserve governor, not while she was Federal Reserve governor. So Trump doesn't have grounds to fire her, but then he was found to have grounds to fire her, I believe. So I think Lowell might actually be a plant by Trump to ensure that these indictments get a guilty verdict. They play dirty like that. I heard Andrew Tate tell a story about some girl that came to their house to party with them because that's what they would do. They would have parties and have a bunch of girls over and shit and their homeboys and shit. And that's just how they roll. They rich, young, rich guys, bunch of money. They do shit like that. And one girl had a boyfriend. Boyfriend got jealous and decided to hire a lawyer to sue Andrew Tate and them for basically kidnapping his girlfriend, pretty much. And the lawyer that the guy hired actually called Tate's lawyer and said, "Hey, look, I know this guy doesn't have a case, but I'm gonna make this money, and if y'all want to make this money with me, let's drag this thing out as long as possible, and I'll drain them dry." Basically, and then he said, "I'll break y'all off something on the back end." So the lawyer that was supposed to be representing the jealous boyfriend actually ended up making a business deal with the Tate's lawyers. And the jealous boyfriend, while paying for representation, thinking he's getting representation, was pretty much getting scammed. So I've seen this type of shit happen before where you have lawyers, where you use lawyers as plants. And it's a pretty clever trick, in fact. I mean, it's the same thing the state does when you get a public defender. This public defender is on the same payroll as the people trying to put you in jail. So what do you think they're going to encourage you to do? Plead guilty, plead out, plead no contest. Do what is not in your best interest and put yourself in jail. Because the people who are signing those paychecks for the prosecutors and the public defenders, they want your ass in jail. So every public pretender is a state plant. So this must be one of those lawyer games that they play. Because after dealing with Michael Cohen and Avenatti, Trump realized that they had lawyers planted in his circle. So he planted a lawyer in their circle. You guys want to see what Abe Lowell looks like? Hell, it's YouTube. That's him. That's him. He looked like one of them slick motherfuckers too. Could sell salt to a slug. That's Trump's boy. Let me see something. A loyal Trump. There's no pictures of him with Trump. That's interesting. Well, that's him with Jared Kushner. There's Jared Kushner right there behind him. Abe Lowell. I'm going to do some digging on this guy because I want to know. I really want to know what side he's playing for. Because I find it very difficult to believe that he's not playing for Trump. I find it very hard to believe. That's some interesting shit. That is some interesting shit. Yeah, he was Hunter Biden's attorney too, and Hunter Biden got convicted. You see what I'm saying, Peter Johnson? Everybody that he represented for the deep state is getting convicted. I think that's what's happening here. I think that's what might be happening here. Trump got his boy on their ass, and they don't even know it. That's crazy. And John Bolton is another one. Trump's reaction. When asked about the indictment, President Trump called Bolton a bad person, but said he was not aware of the charges. Justice Department statement, Attorney General Pamela Bondi released a statement affirming that there is one tier of justice for all Americans and that no one is above the law. I can make mistakes, so double check response. Oh, that's just a side note. So, yeah, so this guy, Bolton, is now next another indictment. And and Trump got his boy on their ass. So they believe that they're getting proper representation and they got a plant representing them. That's great. President Trump stuns America by saying San Francisco is next on the list of cities to go into and clean up the mess. Kash Patel agrees. So the military is going to San Francisco next, according to Trump. And this was reported on October 15th. That would have been 5 days ago. So I don't know if they've already gone into San Francisco, but you notice the color tie that he's wearing, that bright yellow tie. That's the same bright yellow tie that he wore to India during the 2020 pandemic. I don't know if it's the same exact tie, but that's the same color tie that he was wearing. And yellow, the significance of the color yellow, well, ships would use it back in the day to whenever there was infections going around and shit, ships would fly the yellow flag to indicate that there's no infection on board, like their ship is clean, right? And when Trump wore the yellow tie to India during COVID, that was when India was celebrating that COVID was over, basically. And not only that, but the human trafficking operations the anti-human trafficking operations that took place with the Indian military and U.S. Special Forces, those were also over. And Trump was basically touching base with President Modi to get his, basically his reaction on, his response on what he felt, how he felt it went. And the yellow tie signifies not only there's no infection, but there's no infiltration. The ranks, the slate is clean. The swamp has been drained. Now, when Trump wears that yellow tie, say they're going into San Francisco, that means I believe that the yellow tie signifies, because during the pandemic, Q referred to as the deep state infiltration as the virus, because they've infected the system like a virus. So these deep state infiltrators now, this virus is now going to be basically eradicated when the military touches down in San Francisco. And Trump is wearing the yellow tie, signifying infection-free, virus eradicated, because the target list has already been prepared. The surveillance and the intel is already gathered. They already know who they're going after. And the minute they touch down, probably within the first night, all those people will be in custody. And if you look at what goes on in San Francisco's, I guess what they call underworld, there's a lot of, because it's the gayest city in America, apparently. And you know, with that LGBT rainbow stuff comes a lot of pedophilia, a lot of child PORN being spread around over there. There's a lot of pedos. There's a lot of drugs. There's a lot of human trafficking and sex trafficking and child trafficking that goes on there. And it's almost like, and there's a lot of petty crime too, because the police are so tightly restricted that the crime has been allowed to flourish. And so the people who are organizing and running the crime bosses basically, and the people that are organizing and running the protests, a lot of them are based in San Francisco. So now they have to be rounded up. So the yellow tie signifies that they're going after the virus and they have a plan to fully eradicate it. Thus, the yellow tie, the significance of being infection free, or the yellow tie bearing the significance of being infection free. I think that's pretty interesting stuff right there with the symbolism. And in 2020, the USS Comfort docked in New York City. And that ship was said to be a hospital ship for COVID patients. But in reality, it was in a forward operating base for a special operation that involved entering the tunnels under New York City and clearing the tunnels specifically underneath the Clinton Foundation and disposing of the bodies by burying them on Hart Island, which there's a tunnel pathway that goes all the way to either Hart Island or the island right before it where you can take the ferry over or whatever. I'm not sure how that works, but they were saying that they were burying COVID patients, dead COVID patients, on Hart Island in New York City. That Hart as an H-A-R-T. It's an abandoned island. Nobody lives there. It's a very small plot of land in the middle of the river. And if you look up the standard protocol for disposing infected bodies, people who died from an infection, from a pandemic infection, you burn the bodies, you incinerate the bodies to prevent any post-mortem transmission of the virus. And you don't bury them. So the fact that they were burying them means that they were not COVID patients. And I found a French article that detailed bodies of babies being found beneath the Clinton Foundation. And I believe that a lot of children from the Haitian earthquake that were stolen from Haiti by the Clinton Foundation were being held there because, oddly enough, the USS Comfort, before it went to New York City, it actually did rounds throughout the Caribbean and Central America. And the last stop it made before it went to New York was Haiti. And when it went to Haiti, they were offering medical services to the people of Haiti. So people would come to the ship, board the ship, get whatever treatment, medicine they needed, and be on their way. And I believe that a lot of the parents of those missing children were having conversations with those U.S. Navy personnel. And those U.S. Navy personnel were collecting that intel and forwarding it to the special operations units. And the special operations units then put together their target list of who they needed to rescue from those dungeons. And so they launched the operation when the pandemic happened. And we were being told on the news it was just, a field hospital in Central Park, which just so happened to be right over a tunnel entrance. And the ship that was docked at the at Pier, I believe it was Pier 90, which is the closest pier to the Clinton Foundation building. So with the French article, the article out of Quebec, and the logistical setup of the field hospital plus the Navy hospital ship, all the parts to what appeared to be an underground military operation seemed to align. All the pieces of the puzzle seemed to fit. And on the West Coast, there was another U.S. Navy hospital ship. I can't quite remember the name of that ship, but that ship made the rounds down Central America and down the West Coast of Central America and South America. And they were looking for trafficked kids that were being brought up to the U.S. through Mexico and through Central America and Mexico. And that ship was originally supposed to dock in San Francisco. That was the original plan. And then they changed the plan and decided to dock in LA instead for whatever reason. And I thought it was interesting that San Francisco is now again in this second round of operations, or perhaps third or fourth round of operations. I find it very interesting that San Francisco is being mentioned here again. Because if the entire operation wasn't mopped up, the illegal operations weren't mopped up back in 2020 when the rescue operations took place, that means that they restarted those operations and they're functional again. And now it's time to go in and disable them one more time. So Trump, under the guise of mass crime and getting the city under control and cleaning up the mess, sends in the military to clean up the mess, and that's what the people see. But what the people don't see is the special op units that are attached to the National Guard that go there and run those raids at night. And all it takes is for them to wear their gear like they normally wear their gear, but instead of wearing the correct insignia to show who they actually are, they wear police insignia, and they're called federal troops. Because military personnel are federal troops. They're property of the federal government, like literal property of the federal government. Like in the military, you can get in trouble if you hurt yourself outside of work, and the charge would be destruction of government property or damage to government property because you're government property. So, anyway, with the indictments, the domestic military deployments, the government shutdowns, what we're witnessing is another round of deep state roundups. Maybe not the final round, but we're getting pretty close, because now we're starting to actually see mainstream news reports of high-level individuals within the deep state that were gunning for Trump not too long ago now being indicted. That's big. Now the media has reason to pull out their Trump's going after his political enemies narrative. But it's too little too late, because Trump has already proven himself to be an ally to the people, and his political enemies have proven themselves to be enemies of the people and allies to foreign nationals more than they are allies to the American people. So that whole trying to rile the people up to quote unquote protect Trump's political opposition, well, that play is not going to work now. People aren't going to take to the streets in support of these deep state corrupt politicians. And the so-called No Kings protest, that's another one of those paid protests organized by some NGO that's on their last leg of government funding because the shutdown cut the money off. That was their show of force to establish their presence and let the world know that, hey, we're here and we're queer. That's all the fuck that was. That shit didn't mean nothing. No king's protest while supporting the agenda of the royal families. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? And they think that these elites that they worship don't laugh at them. Like, these people are laughing at them. Behind closed doors, they laugh at how stupid these followers are, because these politicians, they're not stupid people. I'll tell you right now, in spite of all the stupid shit they say and the stupid shit they push, they're not stupid people, and they don't believe any of that shit that they push, but they push it because that's what they're being paid to push. They took the money, so now they got to do their job. Because if they don't do their job, and this is why they all at some point have some sort of legal dirt or some sort of sex crimes or something on their jackets, because what happens is the establishment deliberately chooses these flawed people. And the reason why they choose them is because these people are so flawed that they knew if they went about seeking power through any legitimate means, the flaw in their character history would prevent them from getting to that power. So the establishment targets these types of people for selection. They select them because they know that they can always use that dirt that they have on them to control them, through blackmail. And so you have these so-called, these seemingly inept, incompetent politicians that all somehow got some sort of dirt in their history that if it was publicly known, they would have never been there. And they're put in position to say this stupid shit, and they're promised wealth and riches beyond their wildest dreams, and they get it. So if they got to get up there and say stupid shit like tax the rich in order to keep up with their Ferrari payments, they'll do it. Because they're for sale and they've been bought. So you think these people are stupid. They might be incompetent at their jobs, but they're not stupid people at all. They just made a really stupid decision to serve a really stupid agenda. But they're not stupid because they know what they're saying is bullshit, but they also know that you don't know. So they'll say it to you with a straight face and they'll sell you that bullshit. They're like the guys that back in the day when nickel bags of weed existed, those were the guys that ran around selling bags of oregano to people. And they'll look you in the face with a straight face, tell you, yeah, it's some good shit. Some damn seasoning. That's the Democrats. And they know it's oregano in the bag, but they'll convince you that it's some good weed. And then they'll get your money and get away with it. So they're smart because that's a smart play. You just got over on somebody, but they're evil because they deceived them and they robbed them, they scammed them. That's the Democrats. That's what they do. That's how they play. So even when you see Mamdani with his 94% tax rates, that's what the number was. Let me see if I can find that page. 94% tax rate. He knows that shit is fucking ridiculous. He knows that shit is insanely stupid. But he's marketing this idea to a population of people that agreed to allow in millions of illegals to flood into their city. Hundreds of thousands of illegals to flood into their city. So if they're that stupid, then they're this stupid. So I'm going to get up here and I'm going to preach this stupid shit, and these stupid motherfuckers are going to believe me. That's the thought process of this guy. because he's not an idiot. He's just pushing an idiotic agenda, so he has to sound like an idiot. And to us, he does sound like an idiot because we're not idiots. But to an idiot, this is a well-spoken guy in a really nice suit. Like he must be right. He sounds like a genius to an idiot. Because they can't see the detriment in what he's proposing. But this is how they're able to sell it to the people. And the sad thing is the people are so stupid that they'll fight against the one man that's destroying the establishment in order to rebuild a better system that works for the people as it's supposed to. And they'll fight to keep the same system. Like when Trump shut down the Federal Department of Education. Everybody was like, teachers are going to get less money and blah, 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 blah. And nothing fucking happened. Department of Education shut down and school kept going on, didn't it? But they were thousands, if not millions of people, well, millions of people across the country that were opposed to the idea, as if we needed that shit. But the establishment needed it because they needed control over the minds of the American children. Because that would be the next generation of Mamdanis and AOCs and Cory Bookers and Hakeem Jeffries, and the list goes on. And that's why they took over the universities and started dumbing down the universities. Because that's where these people come from, the universities. They all got college degrees, so they all went to college. So if we take over college and start teaching bullshit in college, then we're going to have a whole bunch of politicians, a whole bunch of kids going into politics with their college degrees that have been taught a bunch of bullshit. Mamdani is being investigated for accepting foreign donations, and he supports Hamas. Well, I don't support Israel, and I don't believe in the Hamas story, to tell you the truth. I don't, because I see Israel kill one Hamas motherfucker and all that bombing and all those children they murdered, and I don't care. I couldn't care less about Hamas. Because when Israel talks about Hamas, they're talking about the Palestinian people. Did you know Hamas is actually a political party? And Hamas was elected by the people of Gaza or the people of Palestine as a whole in 2009. And Hillary Clinton said we should have intervened in that election. So because the people voted for the Hamas political party to be the governing body of their country, of their nation, which they have a right to, now the entire people of Palestine are referred to by the Israeli government as Hamas. And that's the justification for killing civilians. They're Hamas because they voted for Hamas. And the Palestinian Authority came in because they were the usurpers, the Western-backed usurpers of Hamas, to take over Palestine and Gaza and paint Hamas as some militant terrorist organization. Israel attacked themselves on October 7th, and there were no Israeli hostages. All that footage you see of Israeli hostages high-fiving the Hamas guys and all that, those are Israeli Mossad agents disguised as Hamas. How hard would it be for them to disguise themselves, dress up in so-called Hamas outfits, and stage some shit? They stage shit all the time. And if a motherfucker kidnapped me and held me in some bombed out country for 2 years, I definitely wouldn't be high-fiving them upon my release. So clearly that was some bullshit. Everything that Israel accuses Hamas of doing is what Israel's doing. Even the Israeli people gave witness accounts of October 7th where they witnessed Israeli tanks blowing up houses in Israeli neighborhoods and Israeli helicopters laying down machine gun fire at a music festival, killing civilians, Israeli civilians. Then the news turns around, the Zionist news turns around and reports that Hamas killed all these people and shit. It was bullshit from the beginning because it was their excuse to demolish Gaza. And they wanted to demolish Gaza because the BRICS is developing, and the BRICS, Egypt is a part of the BRICS, and Egypt controls the Suez Canal. And they depend on a lot of goods coming from Asia through the Suez Canal. And without the Suez Canal being a part of the Rothschild banking system, or Egypt being a part of the Rothschild banking system and using fiat currency, the transit fees couldn't be paid by Israeli ships. So what would happen is those ships would be held up at port and the shipments would not be possible. So what Netanyahu wanted to do was demolish Gaza and turn it into the Mediterranean entrance exit opening at the Ben Gurion Canal. And the Ben Gurion Canal was going to run parallel, but just north of the Suez Canal. And that Ben Gurion Canal would be the new shipping lane for the Israeli and European ships to get from Asia to Israel and Europe and those places, because Israel would then control that canal and utilize fiat currency. You see? So that was the rush to demolish Gaza. And this is why they're still trying to bomb Gaza and take it over, because now the next step is to get in there and kill everybody and bulldoze everything. But they will not get their canal. That will not happen. Because what's going to happen is Israel will lose control of everybody's finances because they control the banking system. It ain't just because they got the most killers running around with guns pointed at presidents. It's because they have control of the banking system is the main reason why they get so much capitulation. Because these people can't afford to lose their bank accounts. They could lose all their money with one person pressing one delete button. A few clicks of the mouse, delete, all your money's gone, just like that. So what has to happen is Israel and the European Union, the home of the Rothschild banking system, has to be completely isolated from the rest of the world. And it'll be very difficult for them to manufacture because the surrounding nations and the surrounding regions like Africa, the Middle East, Russia, and Asia, and so on, will be using gold-backed currency. Thus, Israel will be forced to do trade with gold, which means the fiat currency system becomes abolished. Thus, they'll be forced to use a gold-backed currency because they'll need to buy these raw materials to facilitate their manufacturing process. If they do decide to manufacture their own products, they'll still need the raw materials. So as long as that Ben Gurion Canal doesn't get built, what happens is once Egypt goes full-fledged, gold-backed currency, no fiat currency here, that's when the economic isolation or the economic siege starts to happen. And once that economic siege starts to happen, now we have leverage over the Zionist banks, because if they start deleting our money, we'll just go ahead and delete their ability to buy goods and starve them the fuck out. Of course, that's if China doesn't take them out first, right? So that would be, I guess, the long-term plan to shut down Israel and force them to capitulate, cut off their trade route. Once they're cut off from the trade route, they'll have to capitulate. and thus completely putting an end to the Rothschild banking system once and for all by forcing the world to go to the fiat. This is why, to go to the gold-backed currency. This is why the U.S. under Bush and previous presidents was so quick to go to war in countries where they were moving away from the fiat dollar, because that posed a big threat to their power, their control system. Because what's going to happen then is, once that trade route gets cut off, as long as that Ben Gurion Canal does not get built, with that trade route cut off through the Suez Canal, the U.S. will also have problems with getting raw materials for our manufacturing. And that will be because the people who are supplying us with the raw materials will be BRICS nations, and they won't accept fiat currency either. And that's when we'll have our transition to a gold-backed currency. And that's when what Nasara says will happen, where all debts will be wiped clean. And that will be because once this currency swap happens, every debt that you owe in fiat currency, once the government adopts gold-backed currency, that fiat currency debt becomes null and void. And it would have done us well to adopt the gold-backed currency 10 years ago, but we didn't, because the fiat currency debts is what was keeping them solvent and keeping their banks afloat. So they needed to keep those debts real. So they had to stop the gold-backed currency. So Libya wants to go to gold, boom, we bomb Libya. Syria wants to go to gold, boom, we bomb Syria. So on and so forth. Ukraine wants to go to gold, oh, we're going to overthrow their government. Bahrain wants to go to gold, we're going to overthrow their government. This is why when they tried it in Egypt, the Egyptian military took over. And this was before Trump was even in office. So this whole shit with Trump versus the deep state, this is much bigger than just Trump. This is worldwide. Trump is just a figurehead that's now leading the charge because he's leading America. But America has to take a bit of a back seat on this one and just allow the rest of the world to catch up. And that's exactly what's happening. And again, once BRICS is fully established and the siege happens, it'll force a gold-backed currency swap. And the Rothschild banking system will have to be abandoned. And that's what it's about at the end of the day. That's what it's all about. It's about forcing them to relinquish control of the money. So all the evil shit that they were doing to control the politicians, a lot of that is what's being addressed now. And while all that's being addressed, it's buying time to allow the BRICS to continue to solidify themselves while keeping the Ben Gurion Canal from being built. This is why Trump's talking about taking over Gaza and building this fancy hotel and turning it into paradise. They're not doing none of that shit. You know what they're going to do? They're going to rebuild that fucking city for those Palestinian people. That's what they're going to do. And they might even give them more parts of Israel back because, well, Israel will have been defeated by then. This is what it takes, and this is what's necessary, and it takes time because this system has had centuries to establish itself. So much so that even the psychological aspects, the psychological pillar that props up this system is fully in place, where people actually believe that this is what we need. When all this shit is relatively new, and it was never needed before. But this is a system of psychological enslavement. And all people like me and other truth tellers are trying to do is free you from that enslavement. That's all we're trying to do. because you'll never be able to build a legacy for your future generations if you allow yourself to remain enslaved. And part of being free is understanding the freedoms afforded to you in your country, especially here in America. Because a lot of people are willing to give up those freedoms because they don't understand the importance of it. They cheered for the censorship. Remember the left? They cheered for the censorship when Trump supporters and conservatives were being silenced during election season. Then Charlie Kirk dies. They start losing their jobs because of their free speech. They start complaining about being censored. See? But had they understood the freedom of the importance of free speech back then, when it was happening to conservatives, we would never have seen a day where it would be happening to them. But they set that standard. And regardless of how long you're in power, whatever standard you set, you will have to live by that standard at some point. Let's say you're a monarch in a kingdom, you're royalty, and you eat all the best food, but in order to keep all the wealth for yourself, you got to keep everybody else poor and make them believe that the whole kingdom is poor. So every time they see you, you got to pretend to be poor just like them. So every time you leave the castle and you go out, you got to eat the pig slop that everybody else is eating. Because you can't let them know you're eating good. So you set the standard. At some point, you got to live by it, or else you become a prisoner to it. You can't show yourself and what you really do, because you'll look like a hypocrite. You'll be a hypocrite. You'll expose yourself for being a hypocrite. That is. See what I'm saying? But the left, they don't think that far ahead. And that's what I mean by most people who are at the bottom. This is why the left got so many poor people on their side and supported them. Because they don't think, they just don't think that far ahead. So they fall for it every time. Yes, saving Israel for last. Q drop. Yep, because Israel is the most deeply entrenched foreign enemy in this nation. Israel. And AIPAC is basically the financial heart of their control mechanism. That's how they control Congress. So AIPAC, I believe, is going to get targeted pretty soon. Once you start hearing news about AIPAC being under investigation or something, that's when the shit's going to start heating up. That's when you got to sleep with your rifle next to your bed at night, because they're gonna unleash the crazies. And this is why Trump is so aggressively sending out the military to do the roundups now, because that's Israel's final weapon, is the masses of crazies being led by infiltrators and operatives. And those masses of crazies will go out and commit mass violence if instructed to do so, because they already been thoroughly brainwashed to hate Trump. And if whatever they're instructed to do is in the name of stopping Trump or protesting Trump, they will do it. So we got to be ready, because when it's time for that, when that time comes, you'll know it. You'll know it. They already been bombing shit and killing people and staging mass casualty events and shit already. All you'll see is an increase in that type of activity. You'll start hearing more reports of it. You probably won't hear about them all, but you'll hear about more with more frequency than what you're used to. That will be the Zionist regime lashing out against Trump. Because what's going to happen is Netanyahu is going to want Trump to side with Israel and vouch for Israel and help prop up the fiat currency system. And if everything goes the way I predict it's going to go with the Suez Canal and Egypt controlling it, the way that's going to go is Trump is going to say, hey, there's nothing we can do. We got to switch to gold because we can't trade with anybody. And, well, y'all don't really supply us with shit. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to deal with these motherfuckers over here, but we're going to switch to that gold so we can deal with them. So sorry, Israel, got to leave you behind. Because you see, the thing is, once every country on earth switches to a precious metals backed currency, precious metals are mined from the ground, the physical ground of those countries. So the precious metal, the amount of precious metal they can collect for their country's coffers is basically the value of that, the physical intrinsic value of that land, so to speak. So by using a precious metals backed currency, the only way one country will be richer than the other is if they could produce more precious metals than the other country. But it still leaves an even playing field, because if the basis for valuation of the currency comes from the land, then that's transferable to anything that comes from the land. So your country might not have as much gold to say, hey, we have this much physical money, but your country might have fertile soil and you could produce a lot of food. Guess what? Now you can trade food for gold. So you may not have the gold in the land, but you can use the food you grow off the land to accumulate and acquire the gold. So it kind of keeps everybody at an even keel, where nobody could take advantage. It's very difficult for any country to take advantage of any other country. But when you're dealing in fiat currency and the currency is based on what the government says it's worth, what happens is the government can order more printing of the fiat currency to devalue it, or they can order less printing of the currency to or withholding of disbursement of the currency to help increase the value of it. And that gives one country leverage over the next, which makes for an unfair trade market. And this is why Israel and the United States have pretty much dominated the world, or Israel has dominated the world by way of the force of the United States military and federal government. But anyway, I think we have reached the end of the shoe. Yep. Wow, look at that. 3 hours and 33 minutes. That's crazy. I did not try to do that. I did not try to do that at all. But anyway, I'm getting tired. I hope you guys enjoyed the show, man. So basically, when you see these major events happening all at once like this, they're all interconnected, and it's big things are coming in the future. We got big things coming in the future, and it would behoove you to pay very close attention to everything that's happening and try to connect as many dots as you can, because in a lot of ways, this shit is really hard to figure out. It is. But you'll never figure it out if you don't start trying to put the pieces together. And the whole point of it all is to keep you confused, because as long as you're confused, you'll seek instruction. But if you know what's happening and you understand why it's going the way it's going, nobody can instruct you on what to do or what to think or how to perceive what you're seeing. You'll be able to think for yourself. And that's what I strongly encourage. And hey, we might not always draw the same conclusions. And if you guys draw different conclusions, I'd be more than happy to have a call-in show to hear it all. You know what I'm saying? But I do what I do because I don't want to be the only person that knows this shit. And at the same time, I don't want to see people being fear-mongered into thinking that, you know, shit is actually worse than what it really is. And they ain't no saving America and ain't no stopping the deep state and all this. Like, it's already done. It's already done. The final pieces just have to be put in place for a healthier, more people-friendly system that works for the American people instead of works against the American people and is only there to take from the American people. A system that has something to offer the people. And one that really does protect their rights rather than make it their goal to circumvent the rights of the people. You know, the constitutional republic. That's what we want. Make America great again. When was America great? When it was a constitutional republic. That's when it was great. But anyway, make sure you guys go subscribe to the Citizen Man Backup channel if you haven't already. Also, follow me on Rumble. Follow me on Rumble in case the YouTube streams get flagged or I have to take them down like I just had to do. You can find all those streams on Rumble, so don't miss out on the shows. Get yourself a copy of the Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. Get back to nature and natural healing, metabolic cooking for the weight loss recipes, and anabolic cooking for the muscle building recipes. All three books are linked in the description box of every video on YouTube and Rumble. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so by sending in a kind donation via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo using the tags scrolling across the screen in the banner below. The links that are pinned to the top of the YouTube chat in the black box where it says Citizen Man TV in yellow. Just click the yellow. The box opens up. All the links are there. And you can also find those links in the description box of every video on YouTube and Rumble. And I want to give a big shout out to my sister Elsine for the Cash Apps. She sent me 2. I really appreciate it, my sister. And we got nothing else, man. I don't know what's happening. I thought y'all loved me, man. That's messed up. Thought y'all love me. But anyway, it'd be like that sometimes. But anyway, I appreciate you guys being here, man. I am tired, boy. I had a hell of a weekend and, well, a hell of a week more to look forward to this week. But I hope everything goes smoothly and I don't have any major issues and I can focus on what I need to do and, you know, reach these goals, man. That's what it's all about. Set goals for yourself and try your best to reach them. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you guys for being here. Appreciate the love, appreciate the support, and I'll see you on the next one. Citizen Man, out.